Chapter 845. The reason why Yu Qianqiu told them to run was to see how these two fellows would react after being hit by his absorbing star's great technique, so that he could accumulate some experience when he fought with others in the future. In the end, he discovered that even though the two of them wouldn't die, they had already lost the ability to fight. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold smile. With a few swings of the saber in his hand, he disappeared from the spot and reappeared directly above the two flying figures. The two of you, it was you who were heartless first. Don't blame me for being impolite. A voice came from above. Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang raised their heads and were instantly scared out of their wits. Without saying a word, Yu Qianqiu slashed his saber to the left and right. Two streaks of green light shot out, and two heads flew into the air. The two dried corpses instantly lost their ability to fly, falling diagonally towards the granite mountain range below. The people in the sky were speechless when they saw this scene. At their level of cultivation, it was rare to see someone fight with their own hands. What they didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu liked the thrill of raising his saber. Some habits were hard to change. What made them the most speechless was the fact that the Heartless Palace's Grand Deacon's grandson and Carefree Palace's Sect Master's grandson were killed just like that. After this incident, the two families would definitely trace the matter back to Wangutong, because many people saw them coming with Wan Lihong. At that time, how would they explain themselves? They couldn't possibly tell the two families that it was Yu Qianqiu who killed the two of them. Wasn't it obvious that they were going against the Immortal Palace or the Immortal Emperor? If they had to offend one side, they would rather offend the two families than that terrifying Immortal Emperor. Linger, you've gone too far again. Wan Lihong sighed. Wan Ling was dumbfounded. Not to mention her. Everyone thought that Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang might not be able to kill Yu Qianqiu, but no one thought that the two of them would die in Yu Qianqiu's hands. Two late-stage minor immortal cultivators couldn't even defeat a late-stage spirit-severing cultivator. A hunchbacked gray figure silently flashed to the back of a mountain peak and hid behind a huge rock, quietly watching Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the air. When the people in the air saw this, their pupils shrank. Wan Ling transmitted her voice in shock. First Elder, what are you trying to do? Mu Wan's disguised hunchback elder replied in the direction of the voice transmission. Since those two fellows are useless, I'll do it myself. No. Wan Ling hurried to warn Huang Xiaolong through voice transmission. Once people find out that you killed an immortal emperor's secret agent, our Wan Gutong will be in big trouble. I don't think so. There shouldn't be anyone nearby. Even if I'm hiding someone, I'll disguise myself. No one will know who I am, and Wan Gutong won't be implicated. As long as I kill that brat, I will immediately go out and spread the news, saying that I saw Yu Qianqiu fighting with Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang here. And in the end, both sides were killed. I will make the scene more realistic. Mu Wan paused and said hesitantly, Miss, you can't be suspecting that I can't kill Yu Qianqiu, right? This person's skills are strange. First Elder shouldn't take the risk. Let's retreat. Wan Ling urged anxiously. Miss, don't worry, it's just a crooked magic art. It's fine against those two fools, but it won't work on me. Mu Wan's tone was confident, but he tactfully rejected. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the air and looked around. He slowly put away the blue flame broadsword. His intuition told him that there was danger approaching him, but there was nothing around him. After a moment's vigilance, he didn't discover anything. In a flash, he chased after the two headless corpses and pulled out the storage bracelets from their wrists. Just as he was about to remove the second storage bracelet, he felt a strong sense of danger approaching him. It was the kind of danger that could take his life in an instant. In the blink of an eye, a ray of golden light flashed and quickly enveloped him. Yu Qianqiu did not hesitate to take out the golden umbrella. Ever since he started practicing the animal fencing technique, he had a deep trust in this kind of instinct, and he had never made a mistake before. Bang! There was a loud sound, like a thunderclap from a clear sky. The strong wind was as fierce as a steel knife, sweeping across the ground. In that instant, the golden umbrella exploded with a strong golden light, instantly canceling out the sneak attack of the teleportation. At the same time, the power of the attack was reflected back. The sneak attacker's figure was quickly bounced back, and the hunchbacked Mu-Wan appeared several dozen meters away. "It's you!" Yu Qianqiu, who was safe and sound inside the golden umbrella, exclaimed. He immediately recognized that it was the hunchbacked old man, who exposed his identity at the entrance of the mythical Fire Palace shop. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu was so scared that his face was pale and his heart was pounding. He was secretly thanking the heavens and the earth for Bai Changchun. If he hadn't practiced the animal fencing technique that Bai Changchun had taught him, he wouldn't have been able to defend against such an expert sneak attack, even if he had the golden bead to teleport. Judging from the power of this palm, it could probably smash him into pieces. He suddenly remembered that when Bai Changchun had taught him the animal fencing technique on Obedient Island, he had secretly laughed that it was an animal world and didn't think much of it. Now that he thought about it, he remembered that Bai Changchun seemed to have said that as long as he mastered it, he would be able to benefit from it for the rest of his life. It seemed that he was right. Woo-woo. Old man, I love you to death. Yu Qianqiu hid under the golden umbrella. His legs were slightly weak. He now deeply understood the power of the animal fencing technique. To be honest, he had always been slightly resentful, because Bai Changchun didn't teach him any powerful spells or magic treasures. He felt that their master-disciple relationship was somewhat nominal. Only now did he realize that the animal fencing technique that Bai Changchun had taught him was thousands of times more powerful than any spells or magic treasures. This thing was something that could save one's life at a critical moment. What spells or magic treasures could be more important than protecting one's own life? Golden Umbrella. Mu-Wan, who was sent flying, also exclaimed. Wan Ling and the others in the air also almost cried out in shock. They all knew very well what the Golden Umbrella was. If the golden thread robe was something that everyone in the Immortal Palace had, then not everyone could have the Golden Umbrella. Only the 24 protectors of the Immortal Palace had it. These 24 people were the people around Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and their cultivation was at least at the early Immortal Emperor stage. It was said that the Golden Umbrella was personally made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and was a top-grade defensive celestial treasure. Its defensive power was very strong. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu would have the Golden Umbrella personally, made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. No one was shocked by the power of the Golden Umbrella, but it proved that Yu Qianqiu's previous words were not false. He was indeed Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted secret agent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to obtain a treasure personally made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Old thing, who are you? You dare to sneak attack me? You must be tired of living. Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily. The light from the golden umbrella wrapped around him and shot towards Mu-Wan. He pushed his palms out and shouted, Absorbing Star Great Technique. Once this terrifying name was shouted, the people in the air immediately felt their hearts rise to their throats. They didn't know what kind of evil technique this was to be able to squeeze someone dry. Mu-Wan also came back to his senses and sneered. It's just a small trick. There's no need to embarrass yourself in front of this old man. After sensing Yu Qianqiu's chi activity locking onto him, his own chi activity quickly burst forth, directly blocking Yu Qianqiu's chi activity outside. He did not move, just stood there, and let Yu Qianqiu slowly absorb it. Yu Qianqiu was surprised. He immediately found that his chi was blocked by the opponent's chi. He quickly stopped and didn't dare to jump forward. Instead, he used teleportation and circled around Mu-Wan several times, looking for a loophole to attack. He kept shouting, Suck, 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 I suck. Unfortunately, the opponent's chi was impenetrable. It was as if he was wrapped in an invisible shield. He sucked for a long time, but still couldn't suck out a fart. Mu-Wan had used teleportation consecutively, and used up a lot of his true essence. He knew that he didn't have a chance to succeed, so he quickly retreated, and looked at the hunchbacked old man in front of him in shock. Ever since he cultivated the Absorbing Star Great technique, although he had only used it a few times, he never missed. Even Yan Juexing, who cultivated demonic arts, had suffered a great loss at his hands. However, he met his nemesis today. The Absorbing Star Great technique was useless against this old thing. Kid, you didn't expect this, did you? Mu-Wan snorted and said. I saw the weakness of your evil technique at a glance. As long as one's cultivation has reached the great immortal realm, their chi has been cultivated to the point that it's almost solid, and they can kill people invisibly. As long as they cover their entire body with chi to protect themselves, this evil technique of yours won't have any effect. He didn't explain this to Yu Qianqiu, but to the people in the air. Sure enough, Wan Lihong and the others were enlightened. So that's how it was. Wan Ling looked around and frowned. She transmitted her voice to Mu Wan. Grand Elder, don't waste any more time with him. He has the golden light umbrella to protect himself. And we don't have any powerful immortal treasures with us. We can't do anything to him. If we delay any longer, it'll be disadvantageous to my Wan Gutong. Please leave quickly. Mu Wan paused. He was unwilling to give up. He transmitted back. Miss, with this brat's cultivation, he can't use the golden light umbrella to its full potential. I'll try a few more times. I have a high chance of breaking it. Grand Elder, the golden light umbrella is an immortal treasure personally refined by immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Even if you can break it, have you thought about the consequences? Wan Ling warned him word by word. That will definitely alert immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Previously, we saw that he was only a spirit-severing cultivator, so we thought he was only a spy sent by the immortal emperor. That's why we dared to attack him. Now that we've confirmed that he's the immortal emperor's trusted aide, think about the consequences of killing the immortal emperor's trusted aide? I'm afraid that the immortal emperor would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. As long as it's someone related to Yu Qianqiu, they will all be implicated. Our Wan Gutong will not be an exception. Mu Wan's heart skipped a beat, but he knew Wan Ling was right. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with reluctance. Yu Qianqiu was also staring at him coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a purple flying sword floated in front of him. Yu Qianqiu sneered. I didn't expect you to be able to break my absorbing star's great art. Good. Then try my flying sword. Let's see if you have the ability to break it. Chapter 846. He knew very well that he was safe inside the golden light umbrella, but the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Based on Mu Wan's speed, there was no way he could hurt him. Thus, he purposely taunted Mu Wan, hoping that Mu Wan would be foolish enough to break through his purple flame flying sword. Then, he would take the opportunity to kill Mu Wan. However, to his surprise, Mu Wan only left a cold humph, then turned into a streak of light and disappeared into the distance. Mu Wan didn't even give him a chance to use the purple flame flying sword. She accepted Wan Ling's warning, not daring to act rashly. In the air, Wan Lihong and the others nodded at each other, then quietly chased after Mu Wan. Before she left, Wan Ling looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression, thinking about how Mu Wan had touched and pinched her face, and how she couldn't do anything to him. Her heart twisted uncomfortably. She could only hope that they would never meet again, lest she remembered that disgusting scene every time she saw him. Yu Qianqiu watched as the streak of light disappeared into the distance, his brows knitted together. He was a little confused by Mu Wan's actions, ambushing him out of the blue, then running away without saying a word. What was the meaning of this? Mu Wan's cultivation level far surpassed his own. Could it be that Mu Wan noticed that his purple flame flying sword was condensed from the purple flame, and ran away in fear? Thinking about it, it didn't seem possible. According to his knowledge, even in the immortal world, there weren't many people who had the fortune to see the purple flame flying sword. It was even more impossible for Mu Wan to recognize the purple flame flying sword. This was the first time he had seen something like this, let alone others. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that the problem was with the golden light umbrella. Mu Wan was probably scared away by the treasure from the immortal palace. Thinking of this, he began to worry. If Mu Wan leaked the secret of his golden light umbrella, then it would be troublesome. Who cares? If it really happened, this old man will not admit it even if he was beaten to death, and will instead accuse Mu Wan of framing me. Yu Qianqiu steeled his heart. He couldn't be bothered to think about it anymore. What he didn't know was that he was thinking too much. Mu Wan and Wan Tong's higher-ups would not spread this news, for they had their own concerns. Just think about it. They had already confirmed that Yu Qianqiu was immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted aide. If they leaked the news that Yu Qianqiu had the golden light umbrella, Yu Qianqiu would definitely suspect that Wan Gutong was behind this sneak attack. Ambushing an immortal emperor's trusted aide was not something Wan Gutong could afford to offend. Needless to say, Wan Gutong's secret would rot in his stomach. He cautiously looked around several times, not daring to put away the golden light umbrella that he had taken out, fearing that he would encounter another sneak attack out of the blue. After some hesitation, he identified a direction and lightly stomped his feet. The granite on the ground melted, and he sank into the ground along with the umbrella. After he sank, good. After Wan Tong had to that he had won the earth he and he. Close to 2 hours later, he found himself out of the granite mountain range. Layers of soil appeared around him, and he quickly floated to the surface. When he emerged from the surface, he found himself in a barren land overgrown with weeds. Behind him was the granite mountain range. The barren land stretched as far as the eye could see. Among the lush grass, there were a few tall trees standing proudly. After Yu Qianqiu identified the direction, he didn't hesitate and sped away. On the green and yellow plains, tigers and wolves could be seen chasing their prey. The bloody scene did not attract Yu Qianqiu's attention. His eyes were filled with determination as he flew towards the horizon. Only when he noticed some special terrain would he throw a small silver ball into the air. The purpose of this trip was simple. He wanted to go to the hallucinatory immortal city and register a merchant association. He wanted the merchant association to flourish in the immortal world. He wanted to lead the cultivators in the immortal world to search for the miracle of life. Then, the miracle would begin with him. After flying at high speed for more than 10 days, Yu Qianqiu was in tears. Based on his current flying speed, if he was in the immortal world, he would have circled countless times. But in the immortal world, he had just flown out of this vast plane. How big the immortal world was became a question in his mind. It was another sunset. The sunset dyed Yu Qianqiu, who was flying at high speed in the sky, red. Even though he felt that his cultivation was not bad, he still felt that flying at high speed for more than a dozen days was a little too much for him. He grabbed a handful of elixirs and stuffed them into his mouth. As he flew, he slowly recovered his true essence. He felt that the effect was too slow and was considering when to get some elixirs. Suddenly he was attracted by the landscape below. Although it was still relatively bright high up in the sky, the ground below was gradually shrouded in darkness. In the dusky twilight, there was a scarlet mountain hilly area. There were few trees and bright red stone mountains everywhere. Yu Qianqiu, who was more or less tired, could not help but jump down. Taking the opportunity to admire the strange mountain scenery, he took a break and recovered his spirit. So he landed on a red stone pillar that was like a towering stalagmite. He looked around and found that the reason why the mountain was red was because of the Danxia landscape. The mountain was undulating and dangerous, and the stone forest was like a mess. Under the sunset, there was a gray fog that rippled, giving people a feeling of palpitation. The undulating and messy stone forest seemed to hide some terrifying monster. Although the gray fog was thin, it seemed to be able to block people's vision. It seemed that no matter how high one's cultivation was, it would be difficult to peep at the secrets hidden behind it. The surroundings were dead silent. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a little strange. Curious, he immediately flew into the depths of the gray stone forest. Along the way, he did not find anything unusual. In the depths of the messy stone forest, arched hills gradually appeared. The hills were full of caves of various sizes, and it was unknown how they were formed. Yu Qianqiu circled a few times in the gray fog and landed in front of a tall scarlet hill. Directly in front of him was a cave with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. It was pitch black inside, and a faint gray fog was curling out from the inside. It looked very strange. After hesitating for a while at the cave entrance, he felt that the immortal world could not be judged by the common sense of the human world, so he did not dare to enter. He stretched out 2 fingers, and a dazzling red spark jumped and condensed at the tip of his finger. It became the size of an egg. He condensed all the ordinary fire in his body into this ball, and with a flick of his finger, It shot directly into the depths of the cave with a whoosh, only to hear a muffled hum sound from inside the cave, and the entire belly of the mountain seemed to be ignited by the raging fire. The big and small caves on the hill instantly shone with red light, and one after another flames sprayed out. It was like thousands of fireworks had bloomed together. There was no doubt that the big and small caves on the hill were all connected. The cave entrance that Yu Qianqiu was facing was the place where the fire was the fiercest. The surging flames swallowed his body in an instant, but he did not avoid it, and stood quietly at the cave entrance, letting the fire engulf him. To him, he could not think of any fire in the world that could hurt him. Almost at this moment, from the seemingly empty hill came a series of shrill and angry squeaks. It was so sharp that it pierced one's eardrums, followed by the sound of countless flapping wings. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank slightly, and saw that in the raging sea of fire, there were dense black shadows that quickly escaped from the cave entrance like lightning. The squeaks immediately filled the air. After the raging fire rose for a while, it gradually disappeared and shrunk in the cave. Amidst the noise, Yu Qianqiu stared dumbfoundedly at the creatures that filled the sky. He never thought that the fire that he had set up on a whim would actually attract so many creatures. Bats. Each and every one of them was as big as a wash basin, and their bodies were covered in fur. What made Yu Qianqiu feel strange was that the fire that he had released actually did not harm the fur on their bodies. He suddenly recalled a type of bat recorded in the illustrated Jade archive. It was called the enchanting vampire bat, and it lived by sucking the blood of living creatures. Although they were only as big as a wash basin, they could suck the blood of a live cow dry in one breath, and swell to the point where they would not die. The fur on their bodies was not afraid of fire, and the treasures refined from them were the nemesis of cultivators who played with fire. Their bones were born with the ability to control the wind, and were excellent materials for refining flying artifacts. Compared to ordinary flying artifacts, their speed could be increased by about a third. The most valuable part of the enchanting vampire bat was its pair of eyes. Its eyes were born with the ability to confuse a person's mind. After bewitching an animal's mind, the enchanting vampire bat could effortlessly attach itself to the animal's body and suck its blood dry without any resistance. Harvesting its eyeballs could be used to refine a valuable treasure called the lost immortal bead. Even if it wasn't refined into a treasure, it could be directly ground into powder, which was a colorless and odorless poison. Although it wouldn't kill, its greatest effect was to turn a person into a retard. To cultivators, this kind of non-lethal poison was often more frightening than a lethal poison. However, whether it was its fur, bones, or eyeballs, they all needed to be harvested in large quantities to be refined into a treasure. In the immortal world, an enchanting vampire bat could be sold for about 1,000,000 divine-grade spirit stones. However, this kind of thing was rarely seen in the market. Those with high cultivation would not bother to get their hands on it, and those with low cultivation would find it difficult to get their hands on it. Although one enchanting vampire bat wasn't scary, if it was a group of them, it would be very difficult to fend them off without the cultivation of a great immortal. Unfortunately for them, enchanting vampire bats were social animals. The scariest thing was, there would usually be one or several vampire bat kings with decent cultivation as their leader. If an outsider wanted to take advantage of them, they would have to have some ability first. And the group of bats that Yu Qianqiu saw at this moment matched the enchanting vampire bats recorded in the Jade archive. Each of them had a head that looked like a rat's, with pairs of sharp, shining eyes, like the cold stars in the sky. They spread their wings and circled in the sky, their forte being their speed. They came and went as fast as lightning. They seemed to be circling around Yu Qianqiu, with countless eyes that were as sharp as the cold stars staring at Yu Qianqiu. A savage aura was growing stronger. Chapter 847. Yu Qianqiu had a premonition that he was in trouble. It was very likely that these beasts were going to attack him. The pairs of snow-white fangs that were as sharp as steel nails on the rats' faces could explain everything. They were already ferocious. Indeed, as the ear-piercing screams intensified, a bat that was flying across the sky suddenly changed direction and shot toward Yu Qianqiu at lightning speed. It bared its fangs and bit at Yu Qianqiu's neck. You're courting death, beast. Yu Qianqiu let out a furious bellow, and his 5 claws that were covered in purple light grabbed out. The bloody bat that was pouncing toward him did not even make a sound when it fell into his claws and instantly turned into ashes. Once the bloody bat that was the first to attack died, the other bloody bats that were flying in the sky immediately became agitated. Soon, all of them stopped in the sky. The bloody bats that were the size of wash basins flapped their wings and hovered in the sky. They gathered together and stared at Yu Qianqiu fiercely under the night sky. Their eyes were like the cold stars in the night sky, emitting a demonic glow that could shine into one's heart. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He immediately realized that there was something strange about these fellas' eyes, but it was already too late by the time he reacted. He felt his vision blur, and his consciousness seemed to have fallen into a maze formed by the stars. He bumped around but could not find a way out, and he was trapped in the maze, unable to extricate himself. He could not control his body or communicate with Utopia, and his back was instantly drenched in cold sweat. He was fine after experiencing so many storms. If he were to die in the hands of these beasts, he would die too unjustly. His sharp intuition after cultivating animal tricks told him that a strong threat of death was approaching. After the enchanting bloody bats that were hovering in the sky knew that they had affected the other party's mind, the demonic starlight in their eyes retracted. All of them flapped their wings excitedly, revealing their fangs that were as long as chopsticks from their mouths as they swarmed over. In the blink of an eye, they had wrapped Yu Qianqiu up into a ball. Layers upon layers of flapping. They seemed to want to suck a mouthful of Yu Qianqiu's blood. It seemed that human blood was quite a temptation for them. The scene of tens of thousands of enchanting bloody bats fighting for food was very spectacular. Animals were animals. In order to get a mouthful of human blood, they were working together just a moment ago, but now they were killing each other. They pounced and tore at each other, opening their sharp claws to push away the layers of their own kind that were attached to Yu Qianqiu's body, trying their best to burrow inside. The fluffy blood bats piled up like a mountain as they screeched and swarmed around, making one's heart go numb. After thinking for a while, he dashed over, cupped his fists and said, "I am Yu Qianqiu. Are you the owner of this place, friend?" "You can say so," Xiao Changquan replied noncommittally, but there was a trace of surprise in his eyes. From the way Yu Qianqiu flew over, he vaguely sensed that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was not yet at the immortal realm. However, with his early-stage great immortal cultivation, he could not see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. It was very strange. What did he mean by "you can say so"? Yu Qianqiu frowned, but he still maintained his vigilance and asked, "May I know why friend called me here?" Xiao Changquan turned around and pointed to a tall mountain in the distance. Even though the sky was turning dark, one could still faintly make out the buildings on the mountain. He smiled and said, "My 1,000-bat mountain rarely receives guests. It's getting late. If you don't mind, why don't you come to my humble abode and let me be your host?" This, Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while. He wanted to refuse, mainly because he was afraid that it would not be safe. But seeing how polite the other party was, plus he really wanted to make more friends in the immortal realm, he changed his mind and said, "Then I will have to trouble you." "Haha, I am looking forward to having more friends. How can you say that I am disturbing you? I am more than happy to have you. Please." Xiao Changquan waved his hand happily. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand politely, and Xiao Changquan immediately turned into a stream of light and landed on the peak. Yu Qianqiu quickly chased after him. As he flew near the peak, he paused for a moment to look at the building on the peak below. The building on the peak was not big, like a small Taoist temple. But the strange thing was that the whole building was directly carved out of the Danxia mountain. The building and the whole mountain were one. It was a unique scenery. However, no matter how Yu Qianqiu looked at it, he found it indescribably strange. Night had already fallen, so why was there not a single trace of light in the building? No matter how high the other party's cultivation was, this did not make sense. Chapter 848. When Xiao Changquan extended his hand again, the hesitant Yu Qianqiu landed in front of the house. Xiao Changquan smiled and turned to face the house. He waved his hand and slapped his chest. He opened his mouth and spat out dozens of phosphorescent lights that flew to every corner of the house. In the blink of an eye, the stone pillars and walls inside and outside the house were lit up with green flames. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't know that the bowl-like things protruding from the stone pillars and walls were actually fire troughs used for illumination. The entire mountaintop suddenly lit up, standing between heaven and earth like a green jewel. However, to Yu Qianqiu, who was inside, although the hall was bright, it was a patch of green. There was a sense of eeriness and terror everywhere. The green light shone on the smile on Xiao Chongquan's face, adding a sense of eeriness. It was very strange. Yu Qianqiu didn't know if he was thinking too much. Although the other party was very polite, he didn't let his guard down. He couldn't be blamed. He knew that on the path of cultivation, life and death were often decided by a thin line. There was no regret, only one need to take care of themselves. Not to mention, this was a strange place. At Xiao Chongquan's invitation, the two of them walked into the house with the flickering green light. Yu Qianqiu calmly looked around the house. There were almost no furnishings in the house, only 2 stone chairs separated by a table. The strange thing was that the roof was covered with stone beams, and there were many traces of something being scratched on the stone beams. The layout of this stone house is really strange. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said casually, "It's just materials from the wilderness. It can't compare to the luxurious and exquisite outside." Xiao Chongquan pointed to the 2 chairs in the middle and smiled. "Brother Yu, please sit. Although I don't have anything good in this wilderness, I do have some fragrant tea that is rarely seen outside. Brother Yu, please wait a moment, I'll go get it." Brother Xiao is too polite. There's no need to trouble yourself. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Of course. This is how we treat our guests. I'll be there in a moment," Xiao Chongquan insisted. He quickly walked toward the stone door by the wall and walked down the stone stairs. Yu Qianqiu quickly scanned the surroundings. His gaze paused for a moment, fixated on the 2 chairs in the middle. Normally, the surface of a stone chair that people often sat on would be smooth, but the surface of these 2 stone chairs was rough, as if no one had ever sat on them. He tilted his head and glanced at the stone door. Then, he gently floated up and silently flew into the stone door, following the stone stairs that spiraled downwards. It was so dark inside that he couldn't even see his fingers in front of him. After going dozens of meters deep into the belly of the mountain, a stone door blocked his way. Yu Qianqiu sneered and directly entered the wall beside the stone door. After fusing with the stone, he immediately sensed that there was a rather large space in the belly of the mountain. As he approached the edge of the space, the stone in front of him automatically melted to reveal a small hole the size of a soybean. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked through the small hole. Inside, Xiao Chongquan was indeed seriously boiling a pot of tea. The light from the small stove illuminated Xiao Chongquan's meticulous expression. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was overthinking. Just as he was about to quietly return, he inadvertently discovered that there were pairs of cold star-like eyes shining on the stone wall behind Xiao Chongquan, opening and closing from time to time. Enchanting bloodbaths. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes. He was all too familiar with this kind of gaze. He had almost fallen prey to it before. So he carefully looked again. He would not have known if he had not looked, but when he did he was shocked. After a careful look, he found that there were countless enchanting bloodbaths hanging upside down on the stone wall behind Xiao Chongquan. If he did not look carefully, he would have mistaken them for the original color of the stone wall in the cave. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sneered again and again. It seemed that snakes and rats were in cahoots. His peeping pupils suddenly shrank. He saw Xiao Chongquan pick up the sand pot on the small stove and put it on the tray on the stone table. After opening the lid, he immediately saw that it was steaming hot. It was also at this moment that Xiao Chongquan's handsome and indifferent face suddenly became ferocious and terrifying. His mouth suddenly opened wide, as if a gash had been torn on his face. It was a terrifying sight. The most unacceptable thing was that 2 snow-white fangs the length of half a chopstick suddenly flipped out of his open mouth. Xiao Chongquan leaned over the steaming sand pot. 2 drops of crystal-clear liquid seeped out of the 2 fangs and dripped into the sand pot. Then, the The two fangs retracted back into his mouth, and the hideous and terrifying face returned to normal and harmless appearance. Xiao Changquan closed the lid of the sand pot and carried the tray with one hand. He calmly walked towards the stone door. Dog, you actually want to poison me? A fierce look flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He quietly and quickly left the stone wall. When he reappeared, he had already jumped out of the house. Then, he expressionlessly walked to the stone chair and sat down. He slowly waited. He had already guessed Xiao Changquan's identity from the two fangs that were exposed. It was obvious that he was the same species as the bats. He might even be the Bat King of the enchanting blood bats. After a while, Xiao Changquan walked out of the stone door with a tray in his hand. He said with a smile, "I've made brother you wait for a long time." Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved his hand. "It's fine. Since we were just passing by to rest, it's good to find something to do. Let's start with tea." Xiao Changquan was slightly startled. He didn't understand what Xiao Chen meant. He placed the tray on the table and began to pour tea into the two teacups. The tea that was clear like golden soup rolled in the teacup, emitting a refreshing fragrance. Yu Qianqiu's 5 fingers that were placed on the table tapped as he praised. "It is indeed good tea. Brother Xiao has worked hard." Xiao Changquan placed the cup in front of Yu Qianqiu and smiled. "Brother Yu, please have a taste and see how it tastes." Yu Qianqiu picked up the teacup and looked inside. He saw a handful of scarlet and glistening leaves in the teacup. They were very different from ordinary tea leaves. He could not help frowning and said, "Brother Xiao, why are these tea leaves red? You didn't poison them, right?" Xiao Changquan's face stiffened. He didn't expect Xiao Chen to be so direct. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Brother, you misunderstood. This is a specialty of my myriad bat mountain. It is called red leaf tea. It is definitely not poisonous." He picked up the cup in front of him and took a big sip to show that it was not poisonous. "I've never heard of a poisonous snake being able to kill itself with its own poison." Yu Qianqiu silently cursed before laughing. "I'm just joking. Brother Xiao doesn't need to take it seriously. If I really suspected the tea was poisoned, I wouldn't have said it out loud. Besides, I have no enmity with Brother Xiao. Plus, I don't have anything valuable on me. Brother Xiao has no reason to harm me. Don't you think so?" Yes. Brother you really knows how to joke." Hee. Xiao Changquan laughed to cover up his embarrassment. In fact, he was very nervous because of Yu Qianqiu's words. He couldn't figure out Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to waste so much effort. If he really found out that the tea was poisoned, it would be troublesome. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would be even more forthright than he had imagined? He picked up the teacup and didn't even taste it, directly pouring the tea leaves into his mouth. Like a cow drinking water, he gulped it all down. Xiao Changquan was stunned. Yu Qianqiu slapped the cup on the table and wiped his mouth. "Good tea. Another cup." Actually, if it wasn't poisoned, the tea would be a rare good tea. But what made Xiao Changquan speechless was that if you poured the tea directly into your stomach, can you drink good tea? Xiao Changquan naturally wanted him to drink more, so he filled his cup with the sand pot. Who knew that before the sand pot was put down, Yu Qianqiu picked up the cup and poured the tea into his mouth. He slapped the cup on the table and shouted again, "Good tea. Another cup." Xiao Changquan smiled apologetically and continued to pour water into the cup. Yu Qianqiu was still the same. He picked up the cup and drank it without any hesitation. In the end, cup after cup, the sand pot was quickly finished by Yu Qianqiu. Looking at the empty sand pot, Yu Qianqiu frowned. "It's good tea, but there's not enough. Do you have more?" Haha. Xiao Changquan laughed awkwardly. "If brother Yu wants more, I'll go brew another pot." Although he said that, he didn't take action. He looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously, as if asking why there was no reaction. Yu Qianqiu saw from his eyes that it was time for him to be poisoned, so he made an sound, rubbed his forehead, and said with a bitter expression, "Why do I feel a little uncomfortable, a little dizzy? A little dizzy. This tea." Before he finished speaking, he closed his eyes and directly slid down from the chair to the ground, motionless. Xiao Changquan stood up abruptly. At first he was happy, but then he was stunned. He muttered to himself, This poison can only hurt one's mind. I've never seen it make someone unconscious. Yes, this guy must have drunk too much. He deserves it. He turned around and walked to the door. Standing at the door, he looked up at the sky and let out a long whistle. Not long after, chattering noises rang out in the night sky. A group of black shadows flew across the starry sky and swarmed over. Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with the chattering noises. He couldn't help but open his eyes to peek. He wanted to see what the fairy was going to do to him. In fact, he had the same worries as Xiao Changquan. He couldn't figure out how powerful the fairy was, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only take one step at a time. If it really didn't work, he could only flash back to Utopia to hide. Suddenly, there was a rush of flapping wings outside the door, and a group of black shadows quickly flashed in. After circling in the house for a while, all of them hung upside down on the beams of the roof, folded their wings, and stared at the roof beams with cold star-like eyes. It was the ecstasy bloody bats. Only now did Yu Qianqiu react. It turned out that the stone beams on the roof were for these beasts to step on. No wonder there were so many scratches on them. They were all scratched by the claws of these beasts. Xiao Changquan, who strode back, summoned a black net from his storage bracelet. With a flash of black light, it immediately tied up Yu Qianqiu tightly. Xiao Changquan waved his hand and said, "Bring him back to the ancestor." Chapter 849. When Yu Qianqiu heard that, he immediately felt depressed. There's also an ancestor? There's a super old monster behind this guy? What the hell? The sound of flapping wings could be heard on the roof. A group of bats hanging upside down on the roof beam swooped down and grabbed onto the net, flapping their wings in unison. Yu Qianqiu felt his center of gravity become unstable, and the lingering stench was unbearable. His entire body had already left the ground and was moving. This feeling was very unpleasant, so he opened his eyes and looked around blankly. When Xiao Changquan saw this, he was shocked. However, when he saw that Yu Qianqiu's eyes were blank and lifeless, he immediately laughed and waved his hand. "Brother Yu, the taste of this tea must be pretty good. Haha, have a safe journey. I'm sure my ancestor will be very happy to see you. I won't be sending you off." Yu Qianqiu looked at him blankly, as if he had never seen him before. His entire body was dragged out of the house by a group of large bats. He looked at himself getting further and further away from the building at the top of the mountain. Xiao Changquan was still standing outside the house and waving at him with a smile. "Dog, don't be happy too early. There will be a time for you to cry." Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and cursed in his heart. Actually, when he poured the poisonous tea into his mouth, it was directly sent to Utopia to water the plants. He didn't touch a single drop. He was fully capable of escaping now. But after thinking about it, he decided to let nature take its course and take a look. If he wanted to take revenge, he had to find out the other party's background first. If he wanted to take revenge, he wouldn't even know what was going on. If he wanted to do it, he had to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. A group of bloodbats used a net to slowly drag Yu Qianqiu into the depths of the mountains. Actually, it was quite comfortable to sway like this, but the stench emitted by the group of bats was really unpleasant. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to explode. Under the starry sky, the ground was like an abyss, making it impossible to know where one was. The group of bats surrounded Yu Qianqiu and slowly descended into the largest abyss. After descending for about 100 meters, they dragged him horizontally into a cave in the mountain wall. The cave was quite long. After flying for a while, a warm and gentle light gradually appeared. Yu Qianqiu felt quite curious and wanted to see his surroundings. However, he was completely blocked by the damned bats, and he could only vaguely sense the light shining in. Yu Qianqiu felt quite curious. Just as he was turning his head to look around, he suddenly felt himself losing his balance. His eyes lit up, and the blood bats released their claws, allowing him to fall rapidly. His eyes lit up. The group of blood bats had already released their claws, and he was falling rapidly. Before he could react, he heard a bang sound. Yu Qianqiu was in a daze, and his face was twitching. He could only watch as the group of bats flew back the way they came. Soon, he was attracted by the environment he was in. This was a huge palace, and it was a rare jade palace. Everywhere was smooth and white jade, and there were all kinds of jade carvings. There was even a milky white luminous pearl that was the size of 2 fists hanging on top of the palace. The gentle light was reflected in every corner of the jade palace, and it was very beautiful. The entire jade palace was integrated, and it should be a jade palace that was directly excavated from a large jade vein. Such a luxurious scene made Yu Qianqiu secretly exclaim in admiration. This was really a good place. As he was looking around, his eyes suddenly froze, and his pupils suddenly shrank. On the 9-step-high platform in the main hall, there was a thick jade couch, and on it sat a man in a green robe with his eyes closed. He had green hair, green eyebrows, and a green mustache. He had a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. Needless to say, this person must be Xiao Chongquan's ancestor. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while, and just as he was considering whether to leave, he suddenly saw the man on the jade couch open his eyes. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He suddenly had the urge to laugh in his heart. He finally understood why a person would be described as shifty-eyed. The word shifty-eyed was simply born for this person. But this person didn't know that he had a mustache that belonged to a rat. However, his pair of small eyes that were rolling around were still quite spirited. Another one. It just so happens that I haven't had one in a long time. The man with the protruding mouth, monkey cheeks, and rat eyes nodded with satisfaction. He slowly floated out of the couch and stood on the ground, swinging his incomparably wide sleeves as he strode over. Without a word, he raised his foot and kicked Yu Qianqiu's thigh twice. He twirled his mustache and clicked his tongue. I really couldn't tell. You don't look strong, but your body is full of muscle, and you must have a lot of blood essence. You're only at soul formation stage. How come you can't even see through me? The strength of those 2 kicks was not small, and Yu Qianqiu had to clench his teeth to restrain himself from cursing. Just as he was thinking about how to find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack with the purple flames, he saw the azure-clothed man open his mouth and spit out an egg-sized bead. The entire bead shone with a dazzling azure light, and it was filled with a boundless and powerful aura. It instantly lit up the entire palace, and it was extremely eye-catching. The cyan bead slowly floated towards Yu Qianqiu, who was trapped in the net. The cyan light shone in all directions. Every time the azure light was spat out, Yu Qianqiu could feel a huge pressure pressing down on him. Every time the bead retracted, he felt as if the blood in his body was about to burst out. The azure bead slowly moved along the surface of Yu Qianqiu's body. Yu Qianqiu gripped a purple flame in his palm, and he secretly complained. His entire face was flushed red as he forcefully resisted and endured, hoping to find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. The man excitedly rubbed his hands together and cackled. Not bad, not bad. Your physique is not bad. This is a delicious meal, let me have a good taste. Yu Qianqiu was greatly shocked. It was clear that the opponent was going to make a killing move, but he didn't have the confidence to land a hit. From the corner of his eyes, he saw the azure bead moving up from his lower body, and his heart suddenly moved. Almost at the same time, Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. With lightning speed, he directly broke through the net and grabbed the azure bead in his hand. He quickly teleported to the corner of the palace, and with a flash of purple light, the net that was binding him turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. The man in blue was stunned. He couldn't believe that someone could easily break through the black gold net. After he came back to his senses, he angrily screamed, "Give me back my inner core!" "Stop!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. He didn't dare to let the man near him. The hand that was covered in purple light tightly held onto the azure bead in his hand. However, the azure bead in his hand was not under his control. It struggled more and more, and it was not something that he could control with his cultivation. Left with no choice, the power of the purple fire suddenly exerted pressure on it. The azure bead in his hand let out a sizzling sound, trembled, and immediately became obedient. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to destroy the azure bead in his hand. Without a doubt, the treasure that was hidden in the opponent's body was definitely not simple. It was just the right thing to use to threaten the opponent. If he destroyed it, the opponent would definitely fight him to the death. As long as he couldn't kill the opponent, he would undoubtedly make a mortal enemy in the immortal world. Just as he used the purple fire to pressure the azure bead, the man in blue let out an "ah" and held his head with both hands, letting out a shrill scream. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He looked at the azure bead in his hand and realized that this thing was actually connected to the strange man's body. If the azure bead was damaged, the opponent would also be implicated. Thinking about the two words "inner core" that the opponent said, he immediately understood. It must be the opponent's inner core, no wonder. Looking at the strange man who was trembling in pain, Yu Qianqiu immediately had an evil thought. If he directly destroyed this inner core, would he be able to get rid of this future trouble? With this evil thought in mind, he immediately put it into action. Purple light circulated in his palm, and the incomparably strong and intense temperature of the purple fire instantly acted on the azure bead. The green-clothed man immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body exploded into a cloud of green mist with a "wong" sound. A huge green shadow appeared and flew around the huge palace while screaming, "Wah wah! Quickly stop, we can discuss anything." His cries for mercy echoed in the palace. Yu Qianqiu stared dumbfoundedly at the huge green shadow that revealed its original form. The opponent's original form was actually a huge green bat, with a wingspan of 5 to 6 meters. He had never seen such a huge bat before, and it was green in color. Hearing the opponent say that everything could be discussed, Yu Qianqiu's eyes brightened. He immediately regained his composure and controlled the power of the purple fire. The huge green bat's body softened, and with a "pada" sound, it fell to the ground while shivering. It was truly a huge lump, and it was an eye-opener for Yu Qianqiu. Buzz! The green mist exploded, and the huge bat once again transformed into its human form. It crawled on the ground while shivering and wailed, "Xiao Chong Kuan, you little bastard! I have always treated you well, yet you dared to frame me." It was crying so pitifully that even if someone's parents died, they might not necessarily be as sad as he was. Yu Qianqiu looked at the azure bead in his hand and immediately laughed. It really was a lucky hit. He didn't think that he would be forced to act, and he would actually be able to grab this old monster's weak spot. Interesting. He immediately coughed and said, "Don't cry so much, this matter has nothing to do with that little bastard. I was the one who let him capture me." Ha! The bluish-clothed man suddenly stopped crying. He raised his tear-stained face and choked with sobs. "Is what you said true? I am a person who dares to say anything, but I will never lie." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest as a guarantee, and then immediately sneered. "That little bastard actually tricked me into drinking poisoned tea, but he found the wrong target. How could a mere poisoned tea do anything to me? So I beat him at his own game. I wanted to see what that little bastard was up to, see who his backer was, and why he dared to scheme against me. I didn't expect you to be the backer who allowed him to run amok. Today you are out of luck." Hearing that it was like this, the bluish-clothed man immediately stopped crying. Instead, he appeared to be somewhat comforted. He waved his wide sleeves to wipe away his tears, and directly stood up. However, his legs were still a bit weak, and he swayed a few times before stabilizing himself. It was clear that he had suffered quite a bit just now. On his already pale face, his small eyes darted around, and he cupped his hands in apology. This is truly a misunderstanding. Normally, that little bastard Xiao Chong Kuan wouldn't easily make a move against others, because we also don't want to cause trouble. Chapter 850. According to what you're saying, I was the one who started the trouble? Yu Qianqiu looked at the green bead, trapped by the purple flames with malicious intent. The azure-clothed man jumped in fright and waved his hand in panic. No. It must be that little bastard's brain that's running amok. I'll definitely take care of him after this. Yu Qianqiu snorted. What does it have to do with me whether you take care of him or not? What I want to ask is, there's no enmity between us, so why did you try to kill me? The azure-clothed man was speechless. How could he explain this clearly? Since you were sent here, I naturally had to kill you. After dawdling for a while, he smiled awkwardly. May I know your name and which sect in the celestial world you're from? I'm Wei Chuanxiu. and I have some acquaintances in the celestial world. Perhaps I know your sex elders. Don't try to make connections, it's useless. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted. I'm a wandering cultivator without a sect, so I definitely have no relationship with you. Right now your inner core is in my hands. I only need a thought to completely destroy it. Tell me, how are you going to settle the debt of killing me? The azure-clothed man's eyes darted around, and he let out a sigh of relief. The meaning behind the other's words was very clear. There was a lot of room for negotiation, so the result wouldn't be too bad. He paused and probed. You didn't lose anything after all, but my cultivation was damaged. How about this? We'll let this matter go. You return my inner core to me, and we'll pretend nothing happened. We won't pursue this matter. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu immediately sneered. You're really dreaming. Do you really think I'm made of clay? You'll tell me after you're done playing with me. You must be joking. Damn it. I was brought here by a group of stinky bats, and almost lost my life. Who's going to pay for my mental damage? The azure-clothed man really didn't understand Yu Qianqiu. Now that he had the upper hand, he wouldn't let this matter go if he didn't get the most out of it. Even if he wanted to give up, he couldn't leave behind an enemy to cause trouble in the future. Compensation for mental damage? The azure-clothed man muttered to himself. He thought for a long time before weakly asking, If you want money, why don't you just tell me a number? Talking about money is too vulgar. Do you think I'm someone who needs money? Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. The green-clothed man was stunned. Then what does this compensation for mental damage refer to? Yu Qianqiu stared at the green bead trapped in the purple flames in his hand, and said indifferently, Compensation for mental damage. I mean a price that will compensate me for my fright. The man in green scratched his head. He couldn't figure it out. He also felt a lingering fear from Qing Zhu's gaze on the inner core in his hand. The feeling just now was too painful and unbearable. It was the first time in his life that he had suffered like this. He didn't know what treasure was flashing with purple light in Qing Zhu's hand. It had such great power that it could easily damage his inner core. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and said bluntly, What do you want as compensation? Just say it. Don't beat around the bush. It depends on how much you can pay, and whether you have the ability to pay the compensation I want. If the compensation you give is only enough to send a beggar away, then I'd rather destroy this inner core, to vent the hatred in my heart. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. You're questioning my, Wei Chuanqiu's ability? The azure-clothed man was startled. He pointed at his nose and said in surprise, Have you never heard of me, Wei Chuanqiu, in the immortal realm? Or do you not want to settle this matter? Wei Chuanqiu, Yu Qianqiu said suspiciously, I really haven't heard of you. Are you very famous in the immortal realm? So you haven't heard of me. No wonder you're so daring. It seems that I've been cultivating in seclusion for too long. The juniors in the immortal realm haven't even heard of my name. Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes faintly revealed a trace of nostalgia. He sighed. I've been cultivating in seclusion in this jade palace for too long. I'm afraid it's been more than 10,000 years. Back then, although I wasn't a top expert in the immortal realm, I was still a famous figure. Famous? Yu Qianqiu looked up and down at Wei Chuanqiu, who had a pointy mouth, monkey cheeks and shifty-eyed eyes. He doubted that this person, who was easily controlled by him, could be famous in the immortal realm. Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes flickered as he looked at him. He swung his big sleeves behind his back. He stood up straight and said proudly, Although I, Wei Chuanqiu, am not a top expert in the immortal realm, I'm still an early-stage immortal emperor. Back then, who in the immortal realm didn't know me? The green-winged bat king Wei Chuanqiu? Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. Green-winged bat king Wei Chuanqiu? He suddenly thought of the Ming cult's 4 great guardian kings. Now he was a little suspicious that this guy was also a transmigrator. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up. He said excitedly, How is it? Have you heard of me? Yu Qianqiu frowned and whispered, Isn't the green-winged bat king called Wei Yixiao? How did it become Wei Chuanqiu? Who's Wei Yixiao? Wei Chuanqiu's face gradually became angry. Could it be that someone is pretending to be me, the green-winged bat king? Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He knew that it was purely a coincidence. He shook his head. No, I just said it casually. I couldn't tell that you're an early-stage immortal emperor. Good, very good. He stared at Wei Chuanxiu with shining eyes. Now I believe that you have the ability to compensate for my mental damage. It's good that you believe me. Wei Chuanxiu nodded in satisfaction. Return the inner core to me. As long as it's within my capabilities, I will agree to it. I won't go back on my words. He thought that his name was worth something. But who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't buy it? He raised his eyebrows and stared at the Niden in his hand. If you take it back, and then come back to kill me, then I won't have anything to rely on. That's too unfair for me. I have a good idea. Not only can you get your inner core back, but I can also get the compensation I want for my mental loss. What idea? Tell me. Wei Chuanqiu's eyebrows twitched. He had a feeling that the other party's idea wouldn't be a good one. I'm just saying, I don't need you to agree. Don't be rash. If I get nervous and destroy your inner core, then I'm sorry. Yu Qianqiu first gave him a warning, so that he would be mentally prepared. He then plucked up his courage and said, Actually, it's not a big deal. I just want to borrow 100 years of your time as compensation. Borrow 100 years? Wei Chuanqiu's eyes flickered. What do you mean? Explain it clearly. Cough cough. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and curled his lips. Very simple. You serve me for 100 years. After 100 years, I will return your inner core to you. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes widened and he raged. Bullsh *T. You want to enslave me for 100 years? He seemed to be willing to fight. Don't be rash. Yu Qianqiu shouted. He raised the inner core that was surrounded by purple flames and said, I'm warning you. If I accidentally destroy it, don't regret it. You. Wei Chuanqiu stomped his feet in anger and said, Brat, you're courting death. You dare threaten me. Damn it. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Yu Qianqiu's temper flared. The purple light in his hand shone brightly, and he raised his eyebrows. I'm threatening you. What can you do to me? Wei Chuanxiu was so angry that he started yelling. He pointed his finger and shouted, If worst comes to worst, I'll lose a lot of my cultivation today. I don't want to be bullied by you. F*CKU. You attacked first. You think you're in the right? I don't want to be bullied by you. Yu Qianqiu's mouth was fast, but his hands were even faster. He immediately attacked. The purple light in his hand immediately wrapped around the shining green inner core and started to twist. Ah! Wei Chuanxiu held his head and screamed. With a wong sound, the green mist exploded. A huge and ferocious-looking green winged bat immediately flew around the palace. As if its butt was on fire, it screamed and begged for mercy. Stop, stop. We can talk about it, we can talk about it. Bastard. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Yu Qianqiu angrily controlled the power of the purple flames. With a pa-ta sound, the huge green bat directly fell to the ground. At this time, Zhang Shihe's bloody mouth continuously cried out, I'm dying of discomfort. I, your father, have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Why did I have to go into seclusion to cultivate this 10,000 demons heart sutra? If I didn't form this broken Dan, how could I have suffered like this? With a buzz sound, the green mist exploded. Wei Chuanxiu, who was crawling on the ground, staggered to his feet. Not only did his face become even paler, he was swaying back and forth on the spot. He seemed to be unable to even stand steadily, as if he was drunk. It could be seen that the damage to his inner core had a great impact on him. However, while he was swaying, he didn't forget to wave at Yu Qianqiu and said, Kid, don't mess around anymore. We can talk about it. If you do it again, my cultivation will fall below the early immortal emperor stage. If that really happens, even if I'm beaten back to my original form, I'll still kill you. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and said, I'm much more polite than you are. If you don't act recklessly, I naturally won't act recklessly. The purple light in his hand disappeared along with the shining cyan inner core in his hand. Wei Chuanxiu suddenly realized that he had lost contact with the inner core. He suddenly looked around and said anxiously, My inner core, where did you take it? Give it back to me. Don't worry. I've kept it in a very safe place. Other than me, no one else can find it. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. Actually, he didn't dare to keep the inner core in his hand. His opponent's cultivation was too high for him. It was very possible that his opponent would accidentally take it away. Wei Chuanqiu looked at his body and heaved a sigh of relief. If his inner core was destroyed, not only would his cultivation fall, he would also be beaten back to his original form. Now that he was still standing here, it meant that the inner core was indeed safe and sound. However, the strange thing was that he couldn't sense the location of the inner core at such a close distance. Logically speaking, it was impossible. This was really strange. Chapter 851. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he caught sight of Yu Qianqiu's empty hands. He was stunned, and a ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. He knew that he was in trouble, but he endured it and didn't flee. As expected, Wei Chuanqiu had already disappeared from the spot. His neck tightened, and his entire body immediately became immobile. Wei Chuanqiu's sinister laughter rang in his ears. "Little brat, you're still too inexperienced to fight with me. Where's the inner core? Hand it over obediently." "Old bastard," Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. His neck was tightly gripped by Wei Chuanqiu, and his throat was gurgling, but he couldn't say a word. But even so, he still didn't flash back to Utopia. Wei Chuanqiu couldn't be bothered to waste time with him. He directly pulled the storage bag off his waist and checked it with one hand. He was stunned to find that it was empty. There wasn't even a strand of hair. He immediately threw it behind him and shook Yu Qianqiu's neck, scolding. "What's wrong with you? You don't have anything, and yet you're still hanging a lousy bag on your waist?" As he spoke, his hands didn't stop moving. His sharp claws danced in the air, and with a hissing sound, the rags flew around the palace. In the blink of an eye, all of Yu Qianqiu's clothes were torn to pieces. However, he didn't find what he was looking for. Wei Chuanqiu grabbed Yu Qianqiu's neck like he was holding a duck that had its feathers removed. He shook his neck crazily and shouted, "Where is it? Where did you hide my inner core? Hand it over." "Bastard! Are you a pig? How am I supposed to speak when you're grabbing my neck?" Yu Qianqiu felt that his neck was about to break, and his eyes were blurry from the shaking. He kept rolling his eyes, but the other party was so anxious that he didn't notice anything. There was no need to doubt that this fellow was a ruthless person. Even if he was stripped naked and suffered such humiliation, he still clenched his teeth and endured it without dodging. Otherwise, with just a thought, he could safely escape the clutches of the demon and return to Utopia. But he just didn't want to. Wei Chuanqiu's expression froze as he recovered from his impatience. He also realized his mistake. He immediately released his 5 claws and clasped onto Yu Qianqiu's shoulder. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was not an ordinary person. Otherwise, he would have been dead. The red-faced Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Even though he couldn't move, he still gritted his teeth and said, "Wei Chuanqiu, you old bastard, you're obviously taking revenge on me. Fine, you win, but listen carefully. Since I dared to do this, I'm not afraid of you. I've already teleported the item away. If anything happens to me, someone will immediately destroy your inner core. None of us will have an easy time. Even if I die, it'll be worth it if I can drag an immortal emperor expert down with me. Teleport it away." Wei Chuanqiu was stunned. He thought for a long time, but couldn't figure out what that meant. Then he flew into a rage and said, "Stop fooling me." Without saying anything, he punched Yu Qianqiu's abs. As Yu Qianqiu's body flew up, he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he couldn't fly away. Wei Chuanqiu's 5 claws dug into his shoulder and dragged him back. In an instant, blood flowed from Yu Qianqiu's shoulder, and the pain penetrated deep into his bones. "Old bastard! If you dare to attack again, don't blame me for being impolite. I'll immediately make your cultivation fall below the early immortal emperor stage." Yu Qianqiu roared with blood in his mouth. Pung! Wei Chuanqiu grabbed his shoulder and gave another heavy punch. Yu Qianqiu's body flew up, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. His 5 claws dug deep into his shoulder and dragged him back again. Wei Chuanqiu sneered, "Stubborn dead duck. Do you really think this Bat King is a pushover? This is just an appetizer. If you don't hand it over obediently, I'll let you have a taste of this Bat King's soul-searching technique. Then, you'll know what it means to live a life worse than death. I'll ask you again, are you going to hand it over or not? When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he opened his bloody mouth and sneered. He finally understood that he had miscalculated and suffered a great loss this time. His plan had been for nothing, and he had bled for nothing. Not everyone was so easy to scare. To deal with this old fox, one had to use a direct and effective method. If you're polite, the other party won't be polite. Old bastard. You asked for it, don't blame me. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with hatred. Little bastard, you still dare to be stubborn. You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Then, I'll let you have a taste of soul-searching. Wei Chuanqiu's words stopped abruptly. His evil smile froze on his face. His two small eyes widened, as if he had seen something unbelievable. The 5 claws that dug into Yu Qianqiu's shoulder were covered in blood. However, Yu Qianqiu himself had disappeared without a trace under his eyes. It's over. Wei Chuanqiu instantly panicked. He didn't even dream that Yu Qianqiu would do this. His inner Dan was still in the other party's hands. The anxious Wei Chuanqiu flashed a series of afterimages in the palace. He searched every corner of the Jade Palace in hopes of finding Yu Qianqiu. However, after searching the entire palace, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianqiu. Wei Chuanqiu didn't stop. In a flash, he turned into a ray of light and shot towards the tunnel outside the palace. He firmly believed that Yu Qianqiu must have used some sort of camouflage technique. With his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to escape far. There was definitely a chance to catch him. However, when the ray of light flashed halfway through the tunnel, it immediately stopped. Wei Chuanqiu stood in the tunnel and suddenly turned around. He stared in the direction of the Jade Palace. He suddenly sensed his inner Dan again. It was in the Jade Palace. Without thinking further, he turned into a ray of light and quickly returned. In the end, what he was worried about still happened, inside the Grand Jade Palace. Between 2 pools of blood and tattered clothes, Yu Qianqiu stood there with a cold smile. The blood on his face and mouth was still there. However, he had put on his clothes again. That damned purple light appeared in his palm again. The scariest thing was that the purple light was still trapping his shining green inner Dan. It was truly a matter of life and death. Wei Chuanqiu's mind was in a daze. He knew that he was in big trouble. He had just offended the other party. The other party was obviously here for revenge. He immediately waved his hands and begged, "Please don't do anything rash. Please don't do anything rash. Everything can be discussed." "Discuss my ass." Yu Qianqiu's angry roar echoed throughout the Jade Palace. He cursed, "Old bastard. Now you know fear? Just now, I showed my sincerity to discuss with you, but you tried to kill me. If I fall for your tricks again, I'll write the 3 words Yu Qianqiu upside down. Now I'll let you have your fill." "Don't." Wei Chuanqiu shouted anxiously. "There's no need to discuss. Whatever you say, I'll agree to it." Yu Qianqiu, who was about to kill him, was startled. He could still consider agreeing to anything. He squinted his eyes and said, "No matter what I say, you'll really agree to it?" Wei Chuanqiu looked at the purple light in Yu Qianqiu's palm. He nodded and said, "You're Yu Qianqiu, right? As long as it's not too excessive, I'll agree to it." "You bastard. You actually lowered your standards again. Are your words bullshit? Yu Qianqiu roared. "I want to beat you up now to vent my anger. Do you agree?" The purple light in his hand suddenly increased. Wei Chuanqiu was so frightened that he said, "Yes, I agree." "Bastard." Yu Qianqiu put away the purple fire and inner core. He rolled up his sleeves and strode forward. He pointed at the frightened Wei Chuanqiu and shouted, "You're not allowed to dodge. You're not allowed to use your cultivation to resist. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead." While Wei Chuanqiu was dumbfounded, Yu Qianqiu took a few steps forward. His 2 fists were covered with a thick golden armor, and it was the kind of golden armor that was covered with teeth nails. With a hoo sound, he swung his fist that was as big as a casserole. A bang sound was followed by a ah scream, and Wei Chuanqiu's small body fell to the ground. If one didn't rely on their cultivation to resist, it would be very difficult. "Bastard, you dare to hit me." Yu Qianqiu kept on cursing. He hugged Wei Chuanxiu and gave him a beating. He punched and kicked Wei Chuanxiu until Wei Chuanxiu was like a pig being slaughtered. Yu Qianqiu wouldn't be able to vent his anger if he didn't beat him to his heart's content. He remembered that he was stripped naked by this old man before. He pounced on Wei Chuanxiu and tore at him. In the blink of an eye, he stripped Wei Chuanxiu naked. Wei Chuanxiu was worthy of being an old monster. His skin was really thick. Yu Qianqiu's golden armor nails were flattened, but this guy didn't even have a scratch on his body. Yu Qianqiu was even more furious. He withdrew the golden armor on his fists. He casually took out a large piece of nether iron. His palms shone with purple light, and in the blink of an eye, he made a simple mace that was nearly 2 meters long. The most eye-catching thing was the sharp fangs on the mace. The skinny and naked Wei Chuanxiu lay on the ground. He covered his private parts with both hands and said in fear, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you trying to do? What do you think I'm doing? I haven't had my fill yet." Before he finished speaking, Yu Qianqiu swung the crudely made mace and smashed it on Wei Chuanxiu's head. The strength of the mace was not small. It smashed on Wei Chuanxiu's head. Wei Chuanxiu, who didn't dare to use his cultivation to resist, was immediately swung by a huge force and slid more than 10 meters on the smooth jade ground. Yu Qianqiu carried the mace and rushed over while shouting. In addition to the bloodstains on his face, his aura was unusually fierce. Wei Chuanqiu's heart trembled in fear. He hugged his head with both arms and bent over. His legs shrunk, and his whole body curled into a ball. Yu Qianqiu didn't care how pitiful his small body looked. He rushed over and raised the nether iron mace that looked even bigger than Wei Chuanxiu's small body. With a series of pung-pung sounds, he smashed Wei Chuanxiu with his fists and legs. The Jade Palace immediately echoed with Wei Chuanxiu's miserable cries. They lingered for a long time. Chapter 852. At his level of cultivation, his body was already extraordinary. Even if he didn't use his cultivation to resist, ordinary things wouldn't be able to hurt him. But if he didn't use his cultivation to resist, he would still feel the pain. After all, he wasn't a dead person. What's more, Yu Qianqiu was also a cultivator, so he didn't hold back when he beat him. Plus, the dark steel mace was quite sturdy, so Wei Chuanqiu's fate could be imagined. After a long time, the wailing and howling in the Jade Palace stopped. Wei Chuanqiu, whose hair was as messy as weeds, was naked in a corner of the Jade Palace. He covered his private parts with his hands and weakly raised his bruised and swollen head to peek. The dark steel mace was already deformed. Yu Qianqiu held it and panted slightly. He had finally vented the anger in his heart. He hadn't felt so good in a long time. He felt a lot more relaxed. He twisted his neck, stared at Wei Chuanxiu and said in an unquestionable tone, "Serve me for 100 years. After 100 years, I'll return the inner core to you. Of course, if you perform well, I might return it after a decade or two. What do you think?" Wei Chuanxiu curled up in a corner and said with infinite resentment, "Do I have a choice?" "No." Yu Qianqiu immediately rejected the idea. Then, he swung the deformed mace in his hand, and it flew to the other side of the palace with a clanking sound. He clapped his hands and said, "You hit me before, and I hit you now. Our previous grievances are written off. In the next 100 years, we'll get along well and work together." Wei Chuanqiu's mouth twitched. He wanted to curse, but he held it in. Then he closed his mouth, and a cloud of green mist exploded from his body. When the mist dissipated, he changed into a new set of clothes, and the bruises on his face disappeared. After getting up, he looked around and found that the jade floor of the Jade Palace was a mess. There were potholes everywhere, and all kinds of jade sculptures had fallen. It was really unsightly. Bat King Wei, you really know how to find a place. You actually opened up such a luxurious place to cultivate. Yu Qianqiu looked around and praised. He seemed to have written off all the grievances from before, as if the destruction of this place had nothing to do with him. Wei Chuanqiu's face was originally filled with resentment, but his expression changed when he heard this. He slowly shook his head and sighed. "I didn't create this place. I discovered it by accident. This place is the cultivation place of the peerless master, Tai Shuzheng. It's a pity that we've ruined it. It's really disrespectful." Peerless expert Tai Shuzheng? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He racked his brains for a moment, but he didn't seem to have heard of such a person before. He couldn't help asking suspiciously, a person who can be called a peerless expert shouldn't be a nameless person. How come I've never heard of such a person? That's because you're ignorant. Wei Chuanqiu was halfway through his words when he immediately remembered that Tai Shu was pinching his sore spot. He couldn't afford to offend this guy now, so he immediately changed his words. It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person became famous earlier than immortal Emperor Jin Tai. When he shocked the three realms, immortal Emperor Jin Tai was still nowhere to be found. I guess there aren't many people in the younger generation who know of Tai Shuzheng. Became famous earlier than immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. He looked around the huge jade palace, and after careful observation, he found that there was a faint sense of vicissitudes. He asked in disbelief, why have I never heard of such a person? Could it be that he has already gone to the legendary god realm? No. Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and sighed with admiration on his face. It said that with his cultivation, he was qualified to ascend to the god realm. However, he was killed by someone. Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard this. He was stunned and said, his cultivation was high enough to ascend to the god realm, but he was killed by someone. Oh my god. Who would have such an ability? Could it be that someone from the god realm did it? Wei Chuanqiu shook his head again and turned to walk up to the 9-tiered high platform. After he got on the high platform, he bent down and touched the thick and simple jade couch. He said slowly, that is a story that has been sealed for countless years. I'm not sure what exactly happened. A long time ago, there was a peerless expert among the demon cultivators who shocked the three realms. He was called the ancestor of all demons by the demon cultivators. This person was Tai Shuzheng. Rumor has it that just as Tai Shuzheng was about to ascend to the god realm, another peerless genius appeared in the diabolism. It was this peerless genius that destroyed Tai Shuzheng's hope of ascending to the god realm. The demon god, Yu Qianqiu exclaimed when he heard this. He subconsciously thought of the demon god. Who else could be called the peerless genius of the diabolism other than the demon god? Yu Qianqiu cried out. Could it be that the demon god killed the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng? Wei Chuanqiu touched the jade couch and nodded. That's right, it was the demon god. Then he turned around and slowly sat on the couch. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, in fact, the demon god wasn't called the demon god before he fought with Tai Shuzheng. It was because he defeated Tai Shuzheng that he gained the right to ascend to the god realm. Later on, people called him the demon god. Before that, the demon god's name in the three realms was Yi. Yi. The demon god's name was Yi. What a strange name. Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and pondered for a while. He asked suspiciously, since Tai Shuzheng's cultivation level was high enough to ascend to the god realm, and the demon god was able to defeat Tai Shuzheng, it meant that he also had the ability to ascend to the god realm. But why did you say that he defeated Tai Shuzheng to gain the right to ascend to the god realm and become the demon god? This, Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and said in a low voice, this happened too long ago, so there's no way to verify it. However, there are two legends that point out that the demon god defeated Tai Shuzheng to gain the right to ascend to the god realm. Seeing that Zhang Xian had stopped, Yu Qianqiu anxiously scratched his ear and urged, hurry up and finish your story. Which two legends? Tell me so that I can broaden my horizons. In fact, he was very interested in the demon god. One should know that Yin Juexing, whose life or death was unknown, had always been a shadow in his heart. The terrifying demon god was Yin Juexing's backer, so he was eager to know everything about the demon god. Wasn't there a saying, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious? That was what Yu Qianqiu thought. It was better to be prepared than to know nothing. Many people know about the first theory, but I heard about the second theory from an old senior. I'm afraid there aren't many people who know about it. Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and said slowly, it's said that ascending to the god realm doesn't just depend on one's cultivation. Of course, if one's cultivation doesn't reach a certain level, it's even more impossible to ascend to the god realm. It's said that the God realm doesn't confer gods easily. Every time the God realm descends, the number of people who can ascend to the God realm is limited. Yu Qianqiu was speechless and said, "You must be joking. There's a limit to the number of people who can ascend to the God realm? Are you saying that there was only one person who could ascend to the God realm? So the demon god and Tai Shuzheng fought." That's roughly what it means. Wei Chuanxiu nodded and said, "The first theory is that there was only one person who could ascend to the God realm. As you said, Tai Shuzheng, and you fought over this person. In the end, Tai Shuzheng was defeated and died. The second theory is that there were actually two people who could ascend to the God realm." Two people? Then why did they fight? Yu Qianqiu was shocked and suddenly thought of Bai Changqun. It seemed that the demon god was also a belligerent. Maybe the demon god was also like Bai Changqun, who had nothing better to do and challenged experts everywhere. In the end, he killed Tai Shuzheng. Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and said with a smile, "This legend is more interesting, but I don't think it's very credible. It's said that there were indeed two people who could ascend to the God realm. However, other than Tai Shuzheng and Yi, there was also a peerless expert called Ming. The three of them were called Zheng, Yi, and Ming. Three peerless experts appeared at once, so naturally, two people were not enough. The reason why this legend is interesting is because of the person called Ming. It's said that Ming was a woman, and both Zheng and Yi fell in love with this woman. The three of them were actually friends. The ancestor of all demons, and the demon god fell in love with a woman called Ming at the same time. Yu Qianqiu murmured and raised his eyebrows. Could it be that because Zheng and Yi fell in love with Ming, the two men gave one of the two people who could ascend to the god realm to Ming? In the end, there was only one person left, so the two men fought for that person, and in the end, Zheng was killed by Yi? That's right. The second theory is the same as what you guessed. That's the general meaning. Wei Chuanqiu laughed wretchedly. That's a little too melodramatic. Yu Qianqiu said. He felt that it was somewhat impossible. In his impression, such experts should be like Bai Changqun, who abandoned everything to pursue the peak of cultivation. It seemed that they should not be restrained by love. After a short moment of silence in the Jade Palace, Yu Qianqiu suddenly exclaimed. He raised his eyebrows and seemed to have thought of something. After a while he looked around and asked, Bat Kingwei, did you just say that this is the cultivation place of the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng? Wei Chuanqiu was stunned. That's right. That's what I said. This is indeed the cultivation place of the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng. Is there a problem? Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and said with a smile. Although this palace is luxurious, it's unusually simple. How did you know that this is the cultivation place of Tai Shuzheng? Could it be that you found some evidence here? Why don't you take it out and let me have a look? Wei Chuanqiu's expression changed slightly, but it quickly turned into disdain. Don't you know what experience is? With my experience, it's not difficult for me to determine the origin of this jade palace. Yu Qianqiu nodded and gave a long, oh. He still had a smile on his face as he asked. I seem to have heard someone say something about the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. Because of the pain. I wonder if this 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra is related to the original owner of this place, the ancestor of all demons. What do you think, Bat Kingwei? Chapter 853. Wei Chuanqiu's expression did not change, as he revealed a look of disdain. He said disdainfully, You really dare to think. If the 10,000 Fiend Heart Sutra that I cultivated was related to the 10,000 Fiend ancestor, would I have ended up like this? Although Wei Chuanqiu's words made sense, how could Yu Qianqiu be so easily fooled? He had clearly heard Wei Chuanqiu pounding the ground and howling that he shouldn't have gone into closed-door cultivation to cultivate the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. This meant that Wei Chuanqiu had not cultivated the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra before going into closed-door cultivation. Moreover, how could cultivating the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra in the Myriad Demon Ancestors place be a coincidence? Hee. Bat Kingwei's words make sense. Yu Qianqiu nodded solemnly and sighed. With your fame in the immortal world, I'm sure your Myriad Fiend Heart Sutra has intimidated many people. If there's a chance, I'll have to ask about it so that I can admire the former glory of the myriad fiend Heart Sutra. Hearing this, Wei Chuanxiu could no longer pretend, and his expression changed greatly. Others may not know, but he knew very well that the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was indeed a treasure left behind by Tai Shuzheng, and he obtained it by chance. That was why he had been in seclusion for 10,000 years. It was only because the Myriad Demon's Heart Sutra was suitable for demons to cultivate, and he himself was a descendant of primordial beasts. Now, he was even ranked among the ranks of immortal beasts. Although he was closely related to demons, there was still a huge difference between him and demons. After 10,000 years, he finally found a way to achieve the same goal through different means, and began to condense a Yao Dan. He saw that the day he would be able to cultivate the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was not far away. Who would have thought that he would run into Yu Qianqiu, the jinx, at this time? Yu Qianqiu actually snatched away the inner core that he had painstakingly refined. The meaning of Yu Qianqiu's words was very clear. He was clearly threatening him. Once the secret that he possessed the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was revealed, most people might not know what the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was. But some of the old fellows in the immortal world would definitely have heard of it, especially immortal Emperor Jin Tai. One must know that the cultivation method of the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng, was definitely a peerless cultivation method. Based on immortal Emperor Jin Tai's character, he would definitely not tolerate the appearance of someone who challenged his authority. Once the secret of the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra was leaked, immortal Emperor Jin Tai would definitely not let him off. At that time, it would be the day of his death. At this moment, Wei Chuanxiu's pupils constricted, and a strong killing intent brewed in his heart. However, on second thought, his inner core was controlled by Yu Qianqiu. He had tried before, and even if he killed Yu Qianqiu, he would not be able to find his inner core. The consequences of losing his inner core were very serious. If it was really as Yu Qianqiu had said, if something happened to him, someone would immediately destroy his inner core. Then, he would completely degenerate into a ferocious beast with no intelligence. He could not afford to take this risk. Yu Qianqiu, what do you want? Wei Chuanqiu stood solemnly, and with a gloomy expression he gritted his teeth and said, I have agreed to serve you for 100 years. It is already very difficult. Don't be greedy and go too far. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled. He slowly walked towards the high platform and sat on the jade couch. He touched the jade couch under his buttocks and said, Looks like I guessed correctly. The 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is indeed related to the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng. Wei Chuanxiu tilted his head and looked at him, his small eyes flashing with a gloomy light. So what? Do you want the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra? That is impossible. Let me tell you, I can give up anything, but the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra belongs to me alone. This sutra contains my lifelong dream. Even if I die, I will not give it to anyone else. You better give up on this idea. Besides, even if I give you the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra, it is useless to you. Humans cannot cultivate the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he fell into silence. It was just as Wei Chuanqiu said. He indeed wanted the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. The cultivation technique of an expert who had the qualifications to become a god was extremely attractive to him. However, Wei Chuanqiu's attitude was so resolute, as if he was prepared to die rather than submit. Using threats would definitely not work. Moreover, if it was really as Wei Chuanqiu said, that he was unable to cultivate the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra, even if he put in all his effort to obtain it, the price would not be small. It was very likely that he would lose the assistant Wei Chuanqiu that he desperately needed at this moment. Bat King Wei, you are thinking too much. Yu Qianqiu slowly said. The reason why I am concerned about the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is not because I want to obtain your 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. You can rest assured about this. I just want you to do me a favor. Wei Chuanqiu asked suspiciously, what favor? Yu Qianqiu's eyes instantly lit up. He said in a cadence, If there is a chance, I will introduce a disciple to you. Please teach her the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. As for the speed of teaching, I will leave it to you. I will definitely not force you. However, you must promise me one thing. Before the 100 years are up, you must at least let her have the ability to protect herself when she encounters an expert below the immortal emperor stage. This is my only request, and it is also a request that you must promise me. Otherwise, I don't care if you want to live or die. I guarantee that you will not live past today. Bat King Wei, can you promise me this? This? Wei Chuanxiu hesitated with some difficulty. It was difficult for him to make a decision. Seeing his hesitation, Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed as he continued. Although I don't know why you have not made much progress after cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra for 10,000 years, I believe that Tai Shu Zheng's 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is definitely not simple. It should not be difficult to create an ordinary expert. I'm afraid that you have encountered some insurmountable difficulties. Don't worry, if you encounter any external difficulties during the teaching process, you can tell me. Leave everything to me. If I can solve it, I will do my best. If I can't, I will think of a way to solve it. You only need to sincerely teach her the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. Leave all the troubles to me. Wei Chuanxiu twirled his huge sleeves, twirled his mustache, looked at Yu Qianqiu from head to toe, and said, there are indeed some headache-inducing troubles in the process of cultivating the 1000 Demon Heart Sutra. With your cultivation base, are you sure you can solve them? Sitting cross-legged on the jade couch, Yu Qianqiu said coolly, I believe the speed of teaching and the speed of solving problems are directly proportional. If it is because I am unable to solve the problems brought about by the external objects that affect your teaching, then I can only blame myself. You can't be blamed. You do not need to worry. Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu began to ponder. He realized that Yu Qianqiu's request was actually not excessive. The 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra was broad and profound. If he taught her a portion, it would not affect him much. After all, Yu Qianqiu did not ask him to teach her everything he knew. He only needed her to reach a certain level within 100 years. Most importantly, although this fellow's cultivation was not high, his methods were unfathomable. Who knows? He might really be able to solve some of the troubles in the process of cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. This would also be beneficial to him. After thinking it over, Wei Chuanqiu said, I can promise you. However, what if you do not return my inner core after this, or leak out the secret that I possess the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra? You have a handle on me, but I have no way to deal with you. Words have no proof. How do you expect me to believe you? That's easy. I'll just give you a handle on me to put you at ease. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, he stood up in a flash. His eyes that were staring at Wei Chuanqiu suddenly lit up with two purple flames. At this moment, a purple flame suddenly burst out from Yu Qianqiu's body. A majestic and powerful energy violently burst out. The terrifying temperature that could incinerate everything was emitted. The raging purple flames shook people's hearts. The purple brilliance was magnificent and magnificent. Yu Qianqiu quietly stood on the jade couch. His body was surrounded by the purple flames. He was like an evil god as he coldly stared at Wei Chuanqiu. He carefully controlled the majestic power of the purple flames. Otherwise, the Jade Palace would instantly become an underground ruin. However, he could not avoid letting Wei Chuanqiu have a taste of it. Otherwise, how could he convince Wei Chuanqiu? Wei Chuanqiu was immediately startled by the high temperature. At first, he was able to use his profound cultivation to barely block it. However, when the terrifying temperature truly pressed down on him, he immediately let out an ah and dodged far away. Dumbfounded, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and stammered, could this be the purple flames? When Yu Qianqiu was controlling his inner core, he did not recognize what it was. However, at this moment, when the terrifying purple flames appeared, he immediately recognized it. To Wei Chuanqiu's knowledge, besides the purple flames, there was nothing else that could imitate such a terrifying purple flame. The dazzling purple light that was refracted by the entire Jade Palace gradually dimmed. The raging purple flames were slowly withdrawn into Yu Qianqiu's body. Yu Qianqiu stood on the couch with his hands clasped behind his back. He indifferently said, Bat King Wei's eyesight is indeed not ordinary. to actually be able to recognize it. That's right, it is the purple flames. After receiving confirmation, Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes suddenly widened. He exclaimed from a distance away from Yu Qianqiu, "How is this possible? How could you possibly hide the purple flames in your body?" Hehe. Bat King doesn't need to worry about this. Yu Qianqiu teleported in front of Wei Chuanqiu. Facing him, he smiled and asked, "Apart from me, the only one who knows the secret of the purple flames in my body is you. Once this news gets out, I'm sure immortal Emperor Jin Tai won't let me off." With such a big weakness given to Bat King, I'm sure Bat King now feels safe. I wonder if Bat King still has any doubts? Wei Chuanqiu let out a breath of cold air. He slowly shook his head and said, "Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. I've only heard of people using magical treasures to contain purple flames, but I've never heard of anyone storing purple flames in their body. As expected, there is always someone better out there. I've finally seen it. Falling into your hands today is not an injustice. Since you're so sincere, what else do I have to say? Good. I promise you." Hehe. Bat King is straightforward. This is the attitude that a cooperation should have. Yu Qianqiu laughed happily. Wei Chuanqiu immediately rolled his eyes. Is this considered a cooperation? You're clearly blackmailing me into helping you. The corner of his mouth twitched. Suddenly, he curiously asked, "Who is the disciple you want to introduce to me? Is it worth it for you to divulge such an important secret that endangers your own safety?" Chapter 854. Yu Qianqiu's eyes, which had been fostered by scheming all day long, showed a hint of gentleness, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Shaking his head, he said, "Only by finding someone worth sacrificing for can one live a meaningful life. As for who it is, you will naturally know when you meet them." Wei Chuanqiu's sly eyebrows twitched as he winked and said, "I'm guessing it must be a woman." Looking at his appearance, it seemed he had completely forgotten about the miserable state he had been in when he was beaten. But then again, after getting hold of Yu Qianqiu's weakness, his tightened heart finally relaxed. What he did not know was that this was the mindset of a despicable person like Yu Qianqiu. It seemed easy, but in reality, it was very difficult. Most people would not dare to take a risk that could completely endanger their lives. But Yu Qianqiu, who loved to take advantage of others, knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. The more one wanted to obtain, the more the price to pay would always be proportional. One could not stubbornly cling to one's own benefits and not let others take advantage of them. Otherwise, one would die a miserable death sooner or later. This was the saying, where there is gain, there is loss. Sometimes, taking the initiative to give up a little would often result in more. Take a step back and you will see the world. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and did not answer whether he was a man or a woman. Turning to a serious face, he said, "Bat King Wei, the 100-year period is starting to take effect. You have been cooped up here for 10,000 years. Now it is time to come out with me to get some fresh air." Wei Chuanqiu's expression twitched as he looked around the huge jade palace. Smiling bitterly, he said, "You spent so much effort to get me out, but what do you want me to help you with? It can't be that I will lose my life before the 100-year period ends, right?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him and said with a smile, "Could it be that the green-winged Bat King I fancy is so useless? Haha, don't look at me like that. I am not trying to provoke you. Perhaps one day you will find that leaving this place with me is the best choice. I hope your words are auspicious." Wei Chuanqiu cupped his hands at him in a bad mood. "Haha, come with me. If you continue to be so long-winded, I'll release a purple flame and turn this place into a proper bat nest." After saying that, Yu Qianqiu took the lead and dashed out of the cave. He threw a silver ball into the winding passageway and rushed out of the cave to wait. Not long after, a green light flashed and Wei Chuanqiu appeared at the entrance of the cave. She turned around and looked at the entrance with a frown. "I have to find something to block the entrance of the cave, so that no one can destroy the jade palace inside. That's easy. I'll help you." Yu Qianqiu floated in front of him and stretched out his 5 claws at the entrance of the cave. The rocks at the entrance of the cave began to change silently and slowly fused together. In the blink of an eye, the entrance of the cave disappeared. The stone wall that seemed to have been cut by knives and axes was no different from the weathered stone walls around it. Who would have thought that there would be a cave behind this stone wall? Wei Chuanqiu was dumbfounded. He had seen people who could control earth, but he didn't think that there would be someone who could control stone and change it at will. He looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly. He found that this guy was really unfathomable. How could a soul formation stage cultivator have so many magical methods? Could it be that after staying in the cave for 10,000 years, he had lost touch with the outside world? Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and took out a jade talisman. He injected something into it and crushed it. A faint light quickly disappeared into the air. Yu Qianqiu was no longer a rookie in the celestial realm. He knew that this was the celestial realm's communication method. However, he couldn't use such a high-level communication method before reaching the celestial realm. He coughed and asked, "Who are you communicating with? Tell Xiao Changquan not to disturb me without my permission." Wei Chuanqiu threw the jade talisman in his hand. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Hee, I'm going to settle the score with him." "Settle the score with him?" Wei Chuanqiu said unhappily. "He is my man after all. Are you not going to give me face? What's more, I didn't want to be disturbed, so I told him that he wouldn't take the initiative to cause trouble. You must have done something first. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it." Yu Qianqiu was dazed. He immediately remembered that he burned the bat cave out of curiosity. He waved his hand and said, "For your sake, I'll let this matter go. I won't pursue it anymore." Yu Qianqiu became spirited. He rubbed his hands and said excitedly, "To hallucinatory immortal city first." Wei Chuanqiu said, "Cold wind howled in the abyss." The cold wind howled incessantly in the innumerable gully abyss. The two of them directly soared into the sky from the abyss one after the other, flying away quickly. Almost in the blink of an eye, Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He cursed in his heart and desperately chased after it. Wei Chuanqiu, who forgot about Yu Qianqiu, also reacted. He looked back and found that Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be found. He immediately recalled that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was only at the soul formation stage. Furthermore, he was born with the ability to fly. His flying speed was one of the best in the immortal world. How could Yu Qianqiu catch up to him? He stopped in the air and waited for a while before he saw Yu Qianqiu chasing after him. As he flew, he shouted, "Bat King Wei, don't just care about yourself." Wei Chuanqiu waited for him to catch up and slowly flew with him. After flying for a while, Wei Chuanqiu asked impatiently, "With your speed, it will be a month later when we reach hallucinatory immortal city, right? That long?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He said, "How about you use a flying shuttle to carry me?" Wei Chuanqiu said, "Give me the flying shuttle." Yu Qianqiu shook his head. "I don't have that." Wei Chuanqiu said in disdain, "You don't have it? Who in the immortal realm has seen me use a flying shuttle? Why don't you show your true form and carry me?" Yu Qianqiu asked weakly. As he expected, Wei Chuanqiu roared, "You think I'm your immortal beast mount?" He turned around and was about to leave. "Wait, I almost forgot." Yu Qianqiu grabbed him, and the two of them stopped in the air. Yu Qianqiu took out a black thing with 2 sharp ends and a round middle from his storage bag. Wei Chuanqiu looked at him suspiciously and threw it out with a spell. In the blink of an eye, a black and cold strange thing appeared in the air. "What is this?" Wei Chuanqiu looked at the smooth and streamlined strange thing that looked like a round shuttle. Yu Qianqiu looked at the words, Utopia 001, on the flying shuttle and chuckled. "You'll know later." He performed a spell, and the flying shuttle's belly flipped, revealing the entrance. After the two of them entered, Wei Chuanqiu kept shaking his head. He looked at the empty space and asked, "Is this a flying treasure?" It's actually made of nether iron." He touched everything inside. Yu Qianqiu closed the cabin door, and the cabin instantly became dark. Wei Chuanqiu chuckled and said, "Are you thinking of flying blindfolded?" Just as he finished speaking, there was a buzzing sound from a spring. His eyes lit up, and 8 transparent crystal windows appeared. He could see everything outside clearly. Wei Chuanxiu waved his extraordinarily large sleeves and walked forward curiously. Yu Qianqiu sat on the only chair at the top, and the entire flying shuttle rapidly accelerated forward. Wei Chuanxiu's eyes immediately lit up. He leaned against the back of the chair and sized up the transparent crystal windows. His eyes filled with curiosity. After looking for a while, he coughed and said, "There's only one chair here. Aren't you embarrassed to let me stand alone?" Yu Qianqiu found it funny, but he deliberately looked forward and said, "This seat is for the person driving the flying shuttle. Sigh. With your cultivation level, your speed is too slow. Move aside, let me do it." Wei Chuanxiu vaguely mentioned what he wanted to do. Yu Qianqiu didn't argue with him and gave the seat to him. With Wei Chuanxiu's cultivation level, the flying shuttle was indeed faster than him. Wei Chuanxiu sat on it, and after asking how to pilot it, he directly drove it like crazy. The speed was extremely fast. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a smile. He could go to the back cabin to sleep now. When he turned around and walked to the back cabin, he felt that his center of gravity was a little unstable. It was obvious that the flying speed was getting faster and faster. Just as he walked to the back cabin door, he suddenly heard a strange creaking sound. He couldn't help but turn around and shouted, "Stop." There were already many cracks on the 8 transparent crystal windows. Unfortunately, he shouted a little too late. Bang! The crystal windows all shattered, and a strong gust of wind rushed in. The flying shuttle immediately stopped. Wei Chuanxiu sat on the chair dumbfounded. He said in surprise, "Why is it so weak?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This thing was made by the Jing family, one of the 4 great clans in the human world. The Jing family probably didn't expect that one day it would be controlled by an immortal emperor. At such a high speed, it was normal that the crystal windows couldn't withstand the pressure and broke. The two of them quietly flew out of the broken window. Yu Qianqiu used a spell to keep the flying shuttle. He held it in his hand and said bitterly, "There's only one of this in the entire celestial realm. I borrowed it from someone to play with. Now it's destroyed by your hands. How am I going to explain this to others?" Wei Chuanxiu believed him. There probably wasn't another such strange thing in the celestial realm. He smiled awkwardly and said, "This thing can't be looked at or not. It's fine if it's destroyed. Let's continue on our way." Yu Qianqiu wasn't someone to be trifled with. Now that he had found an excuse, he wouldn't give up so easily. He immediately said expressionlessly, "I think you should just show your true form and carry me." Wei Chuanxiu couldn't say anything about an immortal beast or a mount anymore. It was his fault for destroying someone else's precious item. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "This is the only time. There won't be a next time." The green fog exploded, and a huge green bat with a wingspan of 5 to 6 meters appeared. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He didn't need Wei Chuanxiu to tell him to stand on the bat. The ferocious-looking bat carried him and disappeared into the distance. Chapter 855. The vast land was filled with undulating mountains and valleys, and the winding rivers surged endlessly. Above the clear blue sky, a ray of green light directly streaked across like a shuttle. Yu Qianqiu stood on the back of the giant bat with his hands clasped behind his back, silently admiring the magnificent mountains and rivers below. His heart was filled with emotions. It was not because of the beauty of the mountains and rivers, but because he had never thought that one day he would be able to control an immortal beast with the cultivation of an immortal emperor. He reckoned that those who could control an immortal beast of this level were not ordinary people. On the other hand, Wei Chuanxiu, who had revealed its true form and was flapping its wings, flew in silence, as if it was suppressing a breath of resentment in its heart. No matter how Yu Qianqiu tried to strike up a conversation, it did not reply, and from the giant bat's ferocious face, he could not see its expression. As the 2-meter-long wings flapped, a faint green splendor sprayed out like a rainbow. As the wings flapped, the edges of the wings undulated with a brilliant green arc of light. It was extremely beautiful. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that he would have to withstand a huge wind pressure standing on top of it. After all, the flying speed was too fast. However, to his surprise, as soon as this giant bat flew, its body immediately surged out a very beautiful arc-shaped green light shield, breaking through the air and flying rapidly. The green light was like a thin nebula, rising from the head of the giant bat, sliding down to its tail, forming a green light tail. It was truly indescribably beautiful. Yu Qianqiu stood on Wei Chuanqiu's back, as if he was in a dream. He did not feel the wind pressure brought by the high-speed flying at all. It was a very magical feeling. Every time the green wings slowly flapped, the beautiful scenery of the mountains and rivers below would quickly fade away. It could be seen how fast Wei Chuanqiu's flying speed was. One man, one bat. After a silent stalemate for a whole day, Yu Qianqiu had already sat down with his legs crossed. He took out a piece of roasted meat from God knows where, and it was the kind that was filled with hot steam, the kind that was overflowing with fragrance. He took a bite and chewed twice. The other hand was pouring fine wine into his mouth. In both of Yu Qianqiu's lives, this was the first time he had done something so pleasurable. Not only was it like falling into a dream, there was also the constantly changing scenery below. Plus he was high up in the sky. The rosy clouds were passing by, and there was fine wine and delicious food. The word pleasurable could not describe it. The giant bat flapped its wings and looked back from time to time, its eyes filled with uncontrollable anger. Yu Qianqiu burped as he shook the roasted meat in his hand. With a concerned look on his face, he asked, "Bat Kingwei, do you want to stop and eat something?" The bat suddenly turned around and ignored him. This was the first time in his life that he had become someone else's mount. One could imagine the grievance in his heart. Suddenly, he felt a cold dripping sensation on his back. When he turned around to look, he immediately flew into a rage. He saw Yu Qianqiu raising the wine pot and gulping it down. The clear wine flowed out from the corner of his mouth and wet his back. He immediately roared, "Yu Qianqiu, who do you think I am? Don't be too presumptuous." I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to." Yu Qianqiu apologized again and again. He spread his fingers and tried the absorbing star's great art. A cloud of white mist rose and was sucked into his palm. The wet area was instantly dried up. The giant bat's pupils shrank when it saw the cloud of white mist entering his palm. It snorted coldly and turned around. A smile hung on Yu Qianqiu's face. He finally forced the sky to speak. Seizing the chance, he coughed and asked, "Bat Kingwei, how much longer do we need to reach the hallucinatory immortal city?" Wei Chuanqiu's anger had yet to dissipate, so he ignored him and flew straight ahead. Suddenly, he saw a tall mountain in the distance. There were perilous peaks everywhere, clouds swirled around them, and white cranes danced among the towering ancient pines. There was a clear spring in the mountain, and a waterfall splashed like the Milky Way. The green mountains and clear waters were lush and green. Yu Qianqiu threw away the food in his hand and jumped to his feet. His eyes shone as he clicked his tongue and said, "What a paradise! Bat Kingwei, let's go take a look." The giant bat's sharp eyes shrank. It flapped its wings and changed the direction of its flight. It wanted to go around the paradise that Yu Qianqiu mentioned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "Bat Kingwei, this isn't the way to the hallucinatory immortal city, right?" "Shut up," the giant bat said in human voice. "I'm more familiar with the way to go than you are." Not long after the two left the mountain, a white light shot out from the perilous peak and chased after them. The giant bat turned around to take a look. It flapped its wings even faster and flew away at an unbelievable speed. However, the white light's speed was not any slower than Wei Chuanqiu's. It gradually caught up to them. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He felt something was wrong. He frowned and said, "Bat Kingwei, is that your enemy?" "Shut up. It's all because of you. I've lost so much face today." Wei Chuanqiu's tone was a little impatient. Just as he finished speaking, the white light increased its speed again. It quickly caught up to them and flew side by side with Wei Chuanqiu. Within the white light was a white-robed man. His hair was as white as snow and was simply tied behind his head. He had a pair of white sword-like eyebrows, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. His entire person had an extraordinary aura, and the first impression he gave off was very intimidating. Yu Qianqiu immediately became vigilant. A person who could fly as fast as Bat King Wei and make Bat King Wei feel apprehensive must have a high cultivation. However, the strange thing was that Bat King Wei and that person didn't even look at each other. They just flew faster and faster. It was so fast that Yu Qianqiu's eyes were a little dazzled. He couldn't see the scenery in the sky and on the ground clearly. Everything flashed by in a flash. The stalemate didn't last long. The white-clothed man was already ahead of Bat King Wei. The latter tried his best to catch up, but he couldn't. The former was ahead of Bat King Wei for half a day. Wei Chuanxiu seemed to know he couldn't catch up, so he simply slowed down and adjusted his flying direction. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin as he observed the streak of white light that was growing further and further away. He discovered that the two did not seem to be enemies. However, from how the two of them were competing with each other, it was clear that the two of them wanted to compete with each other in terms of speed. Just as he was about to ask Wei Chuanxiu who the other person was, he suddenly saw the white light change direction and chase after them again. Not long after, the white-clothed man was flying side by side with Wei Chuanxiu again. Yu Qianqiu was staring at the other person. At this time, the white-clothed man also slowly turned his cold face over. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a gaze as cold as ice. When he discovered that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, a trace of surprise appeared in his cold eyes. Before, I thought I was mistaken. I didn't think it really was you, a stinky bat who's been hiding somewhere for tens of thousands of years. The white-clothed man's gaze fell on Wei Chuanxiu. With a face full of disdain, he coldly snorted and said, I didn't think that the grand green-winged Bat King, who was quite a character 10,000 years ago, would become someone else's immortal beast mount. No wonder you're too ashamed to face others, and have to avoid me by circling around White Cloud Mountain. Bullshit. Wei Chuanxiu, who had been silent all this time, couldn't help but curse. He turned to the white-clothed man and shouted, Yunpeng, who's someone else's immortal beast mount? Speak clearly for this daddy. The white-clothed man called Yunpeng coldly glanced at Yu Qianqiu. His meaning was self-evident. He was referring to Yu Qianqiu as Wei Chuanxiu's immortal beast mount. Wei Chuanxiu straightened his neck and roared, What can you see with those bird eyes of yours? His cultivation is only at the soul formation final stage. Use your brain and think about it. With his cultivation, how could I lower myself to become his immortal beast mount? I'm just giving him a ride because I broke his flying treasure. You're looking down on people with bird eyes. Yunpeng was startled. He carefully examined Yu Qianqiu again. His eyes were filled with confusion. Clearly, he was still confused that he couldn't see through his opponent's cultivation. However, he also knew that since Wei Chuanxiu could say something like this, he definitely wasn't his mount. After all, no immortal beast mount would say something like that about their master. Yunpeng's gaze returned to Wei Chuanxiu. He shook his head coldly and said, I can't believe that after 10,000 years, your cultivation still hasn't improved. In terms of speed, you're no longer my match. After so many years, we've finally decided who's better. Wei Chuanxiu, do you admit defeat? Admit your bird feather. Wei Chuanxiu sneered. I can't be bothered to argue with you. You're still so stupid and shameless. You clearly saw that I was carrying a person on my back, yet you still shamelessly came to compete with me in speed. Only you could do this. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yunpeng suspiciously. Hearing Wei Chuanxiu call him bird, he deeply doubted Yunpeng's identity as a human. Less nonsense. Do you admit defeat or not? Yunpeng said indifferently. If you don't, you can put him down. We'll have another fair and square competition to see who's better. Wei Chuanxiu was speechless. He knew his own situation very well. For the past 10,000 years, he didn't cultivate at all. He only focused on researching the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra. In addition, his condensed inner core was burned twice by Yu Qianqiu with his purple fire. In reality, his cultivation was no longer the same as it was 10,000 years ago. If he really wanted to compete, he definitely wouldn't be Yunpeng's match. Even so, the large bat's eyes darted around as if he thought of something. He then said with disdain, Yunpeng, You really didn't live these 10,000 years in vain. As expected, you've become more and more cunning. I've already flown for a long time. Adding on the fact that I was carrying a person to compete with you, I've used up too much energy. Even if I put him down and compete with you now, do you think it can be considered a fair and square competition? Humph. Even if you want to take advantage of me, you shouldn't do it like this. Yinping's white eyebrows furrowed. He muttered, "Then why don't you come to my Baiyin mountain to rest first? When you've recovered, we'll have another fair and square competition. At that time, I'll make you accept your defeat." Wayback King continued to fly forward. He sneered and replied, "I don't have your free time. I promised to send him to hallucinatory Immortal City. Let's talk about the competition when there's a chance." Yinping's cold face was full of disdain. He said coldly, "Don't tell me you know you can't do it, so you're looking for an excuse." Wayback King suddenly turned around and said word by word, "If you really want to compete, why don't you reveal your true form? Just like how I carried him to compete with you. Do you dare to carry him and compete with me?" Chapter 856. Competing in flying speed wasn't like competing in anything else. For those who were evenly matched, even the slightest bit of burden could be the key to victory or defeat. However, Yun Peng could already see that Wei Chuanxiu, who had been evenly matched with him in terms of speed, was now at a disadvantage. She was no match for him at all. Even if he had more people on him, Wei Chuanxiu's chances of winning were very slim. Both of them were descendants of primordial fierce beasts and immortal beasts that had reached the early stage of immortal emperor, but didn't become humans' mounts. Moreover, both of them specialized in speed, which was rare in the entire immortal world. Even though the two of them had always been competing with each other, they secretly appreciated each other and shared the same fate. They had disregarded their own safety many times to help each other in times of danger. 10,000 years ago, Wei Chuanxiu's sudden disappearance made Yin Peng search almost the entire immortal world. After searching for 100 years, he still couldn't find Wei Chuanxiu's shadow. In the end, he suspected that Wei Chuanxiu was in danger. After all, it was very normal to fight and kill in the immortal world. Unexpectedly, while he was meditating on the dangerous peak of Baiyun Mountain, he suddenly saw a giant bat carrying a person. Who else could it be but Wei Chuanxiu? At first, he thought he was seeing things until he saw that the bat intentionally went around Baiyun Mountain. Yunping immediately confirmed that this giant bat was Wei Chuanxiu, who had mysteriously disappeared for 10,000 years. He immediately chased after it and found that it was indeed this guy. Thus, the two of them who had been separated for many years didn't say anything when they met. Why wouldn't I dare? Yunpeng stared at Wei Chuanxiu and said indifferently, "I'm just afraid that you won't admit it after you lose. At that time, you will come up with all sorts of excuses to not admit defeat. Don't talk nonsense here. When have I ever lied?" Wei Chuanxiu's eyes lit up as he looked straight ahead and said in a cadence, "The final destination is Hallucination Immortal City. The first to arrive wins, and the second to arrive willingly admit defeat. Is that okay?" When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he immediately became spirited. He excitedly rubbed his hands together and said, "I think it's fine. In any case, I'm also participating. Let me be a witness." His gaze swept over the two of them, inwardly wondering who would be more comfortable to sit on. Yinpeng glanced at Yu Qianqiu and said to Wei Chuanxiu, "Sure. But let me say the ugly words first. If anyone dares to play tricks along the way, don't blame me for being merciless." The meaning behind his words was clear. He suspected that Yu Qianqiu would help Wei Chuanxiu create trouble. Yu Qianqiu looked at Wei Chuanxiu speechlessly. He coldly snorted and transmitted his voice to Wei Chuanxiu. "Bat King Wei, it seems like your character isn't that good. You have dragged me into this mess and made me a villain in others' eyes." Wei Chuanxiu flew into a rage and roared at Yunpeng. "Yunpeng, listen up. If this brat dares to cause trouble in the middle of the journey, you don't have to do anything. I'll kill him first." "What does it have to do with me?" Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened. After a long while, he managed to spit out the word F*ck. He, an outsider, had become the victim. Yin Peng coldly snorted and flew shoulder to shoulder with Wei Qianqiu. His body suddenly emitted a blinding white light, startling Yu Qianqiu. A huge bird with a wingspan of more than 10 meters, twice the size of Wei Qianqiu's original form, appeared in the sky. Its pure white feathers were like white jade, sparkling and translucent, emitting a hazy white light. There was not a single blemish on its body, making it look somewhat unreal. Its sharp eyes were deep and threatening. Its beak was curved like a golden hook, and its huge and sharp claws were also golden. Its body was protected by an arc-shaped light barrier that looked like a white nebula. Its jade-like wings soared into the sky, giving off an extraordinary aura. This was a pure descendant of the desolate era, the great golden rock with jade wings. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with endless amazement. It was truly too beautiful. Wei Qianqiu, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. He quickly moved toward the cloud rock, and suddenly flipped himself above the cloud rock. His body emitted a powerful force. As he flipped himself in the air, he directly pushed Yu Qianqiu away. F*ck. Stinky bat, what are you trying to do? Ugh. Before he could react, Yu Qianqiu let loose a torrent of curses. The flying speed of these two cultivators was truly frightening. It was truly frightening to be thrown from such a high altitude. When he stabilized himself, Yu Qianqiu discovered that he had already landed on Yin Peng's back. He was safe and sound. He immediately understood what was going on and shut his mouth. Yin Peng looked back, and his eyes flashed with astonishment. He was now beginning to suspect Yu Qianqiu's identity. How could a soul formation cultivator dare to curse Wei Qianqiu, an immortal emperor cultivator? Wasn't this worthy of suspicion? Wei Qianqiu shifted his position and flew shoulder to shoulder with Yin Peng. The two of them glanced at each other and sped up at the same time. Two rays of light, one green and one white, shot into the sky like shooting stars, becoming the two most dazzling spots in the sky. On a flying shuttle, 3 middle-aged men stood in a triangle at the front, followed by 2 elders and a young man and a young woman. All of them wore the same dark green uniform. The 7 of them were all Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor immortal cultivators. The 2 elders in the middle were Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor elders. One was called Duke Longyu, and the other was called Guangjuanru. The 6 men and 1 woman stared dumbfoundedly at the 2 streaks of light flying away. They had clearly seen the changes that had occurred in the sky just now. In particular, Yu Qianqiu's cursing fit the situation very well. After a long time, the man driving the flying shuttle at the front said, "So fast." He thought that his flying shuttle was fast enough, but compared to the other party's flying speed, it was simply incomparable. He was simply too far behind to catch up. Green Wing Bat King Wei Qianqiu, White Cloud Mountain Lord Yin Peng, Duke Longyu and Guangjuanru looked at each other and called out a name. Hearing these 2 names, a commotion broke out on the flying shuttle. These 2 were famous figures in the immortal world. The others had only heard of them, but never met them. Duke Longyu was startled. These 2 experts haven't appeared together in the immortal world for a long time. I didn't expect to see them together again today. Guangjuanru shook his head and sighed. Wasn't there a rumor that Green Wing Bat King Wei Qianqiu is dead? Why did he appear again after 10,000 years? Rumors can be real or fake. Now that we've seen Green Wing Bat King, rumors are just rumors, we can't take them seriously. Duke Longyu sighed and looked far into the sky, looking at the direction they're going. Could they be heading to the hallucinatory immortal city like us? That's not for sure. They rarely appear. I'm afraid they won't go to that crowded place. Guangjuanru pondered. The young man behind him glanced at the beautiful lady with a slender waist and voluptuous breasts. Seeing her bright eyes and confused face, he asked, "Grandpa, who is that young man who landed on White Cloud Mountain Lord? I heard that Green Wing Bat King and White Cloud Mountain Lord hate immortal beasts being other people's mounts. Why would they ride on this person?" The young man was Guangjuanru's grandson Guang Nianzu. The beautiful lady beside him was Duke Longyu's granddaughter, Long Xiaojiu. The former seemed to know the latter very well. Duke Longyu nodded and said, I think it's strange too. Unfortunately, I was too focused on Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng. I didn't see the young man's face clearly. I wonder what kind of expert he is to make these two experts ride on him willingly. Does junior marshal brother Guang know this person? He noticed that Guang Juanru was frowning in thought, so he asked. I didn't pay much attention to him, but he does look familiar. Guang Juanru stroked his beard and pondered. Suddenly, he raised his head and said in shock. It's him? How is this possible? Everyone on the flying shuttle stared at him. Duke Longyu smiled faintly and said, Junior Marshal Brother Guang, don't keep us guessing. Who is this person? Guang Juanru smiled and shook his head. I saw him when I led the team to the God Ruin Realm meeting. This person is the most famous young man after the God Ruin Realm meeting. But everyone says he's a demigod wandering cultivator. Why is he riding on Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng's back? This is simply unimaginable. When everyone heard this, they looked at each other in disbelief. Duke Longyu frowned and said, Could this person be the Yu Qianqiu who single-handedly killed 30 disciples of Heartless Palace in the Divine Ruin Realm? If I'm not wrong, it should be him. Guang Junru smiled bitterly. Everyone said that he has offended Heartless Palace, and they will definitely not let him go. But who would have thought that he has the support of Green Wing Bat King and White Cloud Mountain Lord? I'm afraid that even if Heartless Palace wants to touch him, they will have to think twice. If these two old monsters join hands, if those old fellows from Heartless Palace don't come out, they probably won't be able to do anything to Yu Qianqiu. After all, these two old monsters are not to be trifled with. Long Xiaojiu, who had been depressed all this while, suddenly bit her lips. Hatred flashed across her eyes as she asked, This Yu Qianqiu should be that Wan Ling's lover, right? I heard that Wan Ling shamelessly flirted with that Yu Qianqiu in front of everyone. Grandpa Guang, you were at the scene, you should have seen it too, right? The flying shuttle instantly became silent. Everyone was secretly sizing each other up. Ancestor Guang Nianzu looked at Long Xiaojiu with a complicated expression. Everyone present knew that Long Xiaojiu and Wan Ling were archenemies. Long Xiaojiu was originally in love with a handsome young man, and both parties were already discussing marriage. Who knew that Wan Ling would suddenly come out and interfere, and actually bewitched the man who was about to become Long Xiaojiu's husband away? The most infuriating thing was that after Wan Ling coaxed that man to break up with Long Xiaojiu, she also kicked that man away. In the end, that man found Long Xiaojiu to repent and beg her to forgive him. Long Xiaojiu, who suffered great humiliation, killed that man in a fit of anger, which caused quite a bit of trouble. Fortunately, Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor was strong enough, and this matter was finally settled. But Long Xiaojiu and Wan Ling were at loggerheads, almost regardless of the occasion. As long as they met, they would make a big fuss. But Long Xiaojiu always suffered losses in Wan Ling's hands. Chapter 857. In short, Long Xiaojiu was always at a disadvantage in every aspect of the battle. Even in terms of their respective backgrounds, Long Xiaojiu was slightly inferior. Putting aside whether Wan Gutong or Hidden Dragon Manor was more powerful, the important thing was that Wan Ling's grandfather was Wan Gutong's sect master, while Long Xiaojiu's grandfather was only an elder of Hidden Dragon Manor. On this point, Long Xiaojiu was at a huge disadvantage. There were some things Wan Ling dared to say and do, because Wan Bosheng could handle it. But when it came to Long Xiaojiu, she would have many scruples. After all, her grandfather could not be the master of Hidden Dragon Manor. Duke Longyu furrowed his brows, sighed slightly and said, Little Jiu Heir, let bygones be bygones. There's no need to hold a grudge against a man who isn't worth it. Otherwise, you'll be the one who gets hurt in the end. He then gave Guang Juanru a meaningful glance, and the latter immediately gave Guang Nianzu a meaningful glance as well. Long Xiaojiu had been depressed ever since she experienced that setback in her relationship, and Guang Nianzu had been her firm pursuer for a long time. Thus, the elders of both sides had the intention of matchmaking. This trip to hallucinatory Immortal City, the two elders said that they were going to do something, but in reality, It was to create an opportunity for the two of them. In reality, if this was in the past, Guang Juanru would not have been willing, even though he was Duke Long Yu's junior brother. The main reason he was unwilling was because Long Xiaojiu's setback in her relationship became the biggest joke in the immortal world. Just as she was about to marry, her man was snatched away by another woman. To put it bluntly, her reputation was not too good. Guang Juanru naturally did not want his grandson's reputation to be affected. However, the world was full of setbacks. Guang Juanru led a team to participate in the God Ruin's realm gathering, but the entire team was annihilated. Originally, all the sects were in similar situations, so it was not a loss of face for Hidden Dragon Manor. However, the key was that his background in the sect was not deep, because the direct descendants of Hidden Dragon Manor all had the surname Long, and he was an external elder. Thus, there were people who wanted to use this matter to mess with him. At this time, Long Yu was worried about Long Xiaojiu's marriage. Although he knew that his granddaughter was still pure, there were all kinds of rumors going around. His granddaughter had actually become a Yushu, causing all the young geniuses who were interested to avoid Long Xiaojiu like a snake or a scorpion. There were great talents who wanted to play around, but if he really wanted to marry her, everyone would think that it was a joke, and they would all tactfully refuse. Duke Long Yu was enraged. He naturally couldn't let his granddaughter become someone else's plaything. Coincidentally, his junior martial brother was asking for help at this time. He immediately remembered that his junior martial brother's grandson was a firm pursuer of his granddaughter. In the past, he couldn't ask his junior martial brother for help, but now, therefore, Duke Long Yu hinted vaguely to see if they could get married. At this point, Guang Juanru couldn't refuse anymore. He knew that if something happened to him, his grandson's future would be bleak. Sometimes reputation was not as important as one's life. Thus, no matter how he felt, he still agreed happily on the surface. He was straightforward, but Duke Long Yu was even more straightforward. He immediately used all the connections he could and successfully helped his junior brother overcome this obstacle. This was why the two old guys took the lead and match-made the two youngsters. This was really a painstaking effort. After Guang Nianzu received his grandfather's hint, he immediately smiled at Long Xiaojiu. Xiaojiu, why bother with a woman like that? Who doesn't know that she used Wan Bosheng to run amok in the immortal world? Don't worry. Someone will take care of her sooner or later. Long Xiaojiu looked at him indifferently, as if she was looking at a stranger. She unintentionally glanced at her grandfather who was frowning and looking at her. She immediately squeezed out a smile and replied to Guang Nianzu. N. Guang Nianzu's joy was written all over his face. He pointed at the beautiful scenery of the mountains and rivers below, and chattered endlessly. Long Xiaojiu cooperated with him with a forced smile, and nodded continuously. She was a man of few words, and refused to give a complete sentence to Guang Nianzu. Guang Nianzu didn't mind. Although his grandfather Guang Juanru also had a smile on his face, it was a little unnatural. Some were happy and some were sad. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu had forgotten all his worries. He sat cross-legged on the back of the cloud rock with a smug smile on his face. His shoulders trembled as he laughed. From time to time, he waved his hand and shouted at Wei Chuanqiu who was chasing after him. Bat King Wei. Faster, faster, we'll catch up soon. Hee. One in front and one behind. One green and one white. Two streams of light cut through the sky. The surrounding clouds disappeared in an instant. It had to be said that carrying a person was indeed a burden in a competition of pure speed. However, Wei Chuanqiu was still clearly at a disadvantage. From the beginning, they were flying shoulder to shoulder. Now they were half a body lower. Now there was a distance of nearly 100 meters between them. However, Big Bat's eyes had turned red. Clearly, he was very competitive and his eyes were bloodshot. No one knew when it started, but there were more and more streams of light coming and going in the surroundings. All the immortal cultivators that were tearing through the sky were shocked by this world-shocking speed, and all of them stopped in midair as they watched the azure and white streaks of light chase after each other. From time to time, the exclamations of White Cloud Mountain Master and green-winged Bat King resounded in the air. What attracted everyone's attention the most was still Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the back of the cloud rock, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws at Wei Chuanqiu. After all, the celestial realm was so big. There weren't many people who could recognize him. Yu Qianqiu. The frequency at which the flowing lights of various colors appeared became more and more frequent. Yun Peng, who had been flying quickly in front of him, was shocked when he came into contact with the surprised and shocked gazes. Only then did he realize that he, the master of White Cloud Mountain, had become someone else's mount. If no one saw it, it wouldn't matter. But what was worse was that so many people saw it. That heart of the cloud rock. It instantly became cold. He, who had always been arrogant for the first time, his eyes became evasive and unconfident. He didn't dare to look at everyone's shocked eyes. Due to his absent-mindedness, his speed started to slow down. From the increasing number of people appearing in the surroundings, he could determine that they weren't far from illusionary Immortal City. The closer they got to illusionary Immortal City, the more people would appear. Bat King Wei. Quick, we're close. Yu Qianqiu excitedly waved his arms. He didn't expect Wei Chuanqiu's potential to be so great. He was actually catching up faster and faster. In reality, this was just his misperception. He was sitting on the cloud rock, and the cloud rock's speed was gradually slowing down. He just couldn't feel it. But to a pursuer like Wei Chuanqiu, he could clearly feel it. Wei Chuanqiu looked around and was instantly overjoyed. Wei Chuanqiu was very clear about the cloud rock's character. The cloud rock was arrogant and treasured its feathers. How could it be someone else's mount? From the moment Yu Qianqiu landed on his back, Wei Chuanqiu knew that the cloud rock was definitely going to lose. Now that he saw it, it was just as he expected. He had fallen for his trap. The gap between the two was getting smaller. 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters. Yu Qianqiu jumped up excitedly. He waved his arms and shouted, "Bat King Wei is catching up. Quick!" "All right," Wei Chuanqiu shouted. The two finally returned to a situation where they were flying side by side. After a short stalemate, Wei Chuanqiu's figure slowly moved forward. He laughed sinisterly and gradually shook off the cloud rock. In the end, the cloud rock was the one chasing him. At this moment, the cloud rock didn't seem to see this scene. His sharp and spirited eyes were somewhat slack as he flew numbly. His arrogant heart was ruthlessly trampled on. He didn't know what was going on. Why did he agree to let Yu Qianqiu ride on his back? But it also felt like he was the one who wanted to compete with Wei Chuanqiu. Actually, the reason was very simple. It was because he saw an old friend that he hadn't seen for 10,000 years. He didn't expect that Wei Chuanqiu was still alive, so he was too excited. However, he was also a person with a cold face but a warm heart. He was used to using actions to express himself. In his heart, continuing the competition from 10,000 years ago was the best greeting gift. Wei Chuanqiu's sinister laughter, as he brushed past, caused the excited Yu Qianqiu to be slightly startled. He sensed that something was wrong. Furthermore, he finally sensed that Yun Peng's speed was gradually slowing down. Looking at the surprised gazes from all around him, he seemed to have guessed something. "Damn it! Don't vent your anger on me when you lose." Yu Qianqiu coughed and sat down cross-legged. He no longer cheered for Wei Chuanqiu. Instead, he heavily patted Yun Peng and said, "Senior Yun, Bat King Wei has already overtaken you when you weren't paying attention." Yun Peng suddenly woke up from his daze. Hearing the sinister laughter that came from 100 meters away, he immediately understood everything. He immediately shouted angrily, "Wei Chuanqiu, you dare to scheme against me? T. If you want to act shamelessly, then say it clearly. If you bet, then you have to accept your loss. Don't play this game." Wei Chuanqiu's voice came from the front. Yun Peng's eyes suddenly burst with a bright light. Without saying anything, his flying speed exploded. He chased after the stars and the moon as he bit towards Wei Chuanqiu. He had already thought it through. Since he had already lost face, he could not let Wei Chuanqiu's scheme succeed. The distance between the two sides immediately began to slowly close. Wei Chuanqiu immediately felt the pressure. In his heart, he cursed Yu Qianqiu for blindly interfering. If he let Yun Peng become stupid for a while longer, then he would definitely win. The two of them instantly went all out. Their flashing speed caused a burst of exclamations in the air. In Chu Tian's eyes, a vast and boundless sea of clouds appeared. There were countless streaks of light rising and falling in the clouds. Because of this, the two of them became even more fierce. Yin Peng was slowly catching up with an unbelievable speed, but in the end, he was still a bit late. In an instant, the two of them rushed into the sky above the vast sea of clouds. The streaks of light scattered to the sides in shock. Wei Chuanxiu, who was leading by nearly 10 meters, suddenly changed his direction. He directly turned and soared into the sky. In the air, he exploded into a cloud of green mist. Yin Peng followed closely behind. In a flash of white light he also appeared. Yu Qianqiu, who had been thrown far away by the inertia, quickly flew towards the two of them. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.